Recap. The story so far. Previously, in Dead Awake Overrun. Alice and Rowan wake up at the supermarket and are taken hostage by a gang. After gaining one of the gang's trust, Rowan orchestrates an escape plan. They meet Olive at the holiday cabin, but get into a fight about the woman's intentions. The cabin explodes, and Rowan is bitten. Alice escapes with Charles. Maggie takes Todd to her home and takes steps to protect her property. The police arrive and take Maggie to the station, splitting her from Todd and Claire. Soon, she realizes that the police aren't real and has to defend herself against being eaten alive. She breaks out and cycles back home on a bike. Meanwhile, the house is attacked by infected, and one of Claire's friends, Ross, arrives at the property. Charles and Olive head to meet Alice at the holiday cabin. On the way, they intercept an SOS call from the local community center. Charles knows the voice as someone who helped him once. It turns out to be a setup, and they barely escape with their lives. At the holiday cabin, Olive is killed in an explosion. Charles and Alice leave together. We are introduced to Sonia, a doctor at Lifelong Corporation. Sonia attends a meeting with Janice, the health secretary, where she is grilled about Lifelong's part in the Egglemore crisis. Back at HQ, Sonia starts erecting speakers around the city in an attempt to control the infected. Sonia argues with Oswald about the intern following her around, Lola. Oswald reveals that Lifelong have discovered that Sonia's daughter, Olive, has been breaking into the company servers. As Sonia returns to her experiments, she is told that something has happened to Olive. Prologue. Cassandra nearly broke her fucking neck. After running up 3 flights of stairs, she sprinted towards the fire door with the vigor of a young athlete and bounced right off, nearly toppling back down the exposed concrete steps. She'd managed to survive the last few days in her office building, having been the only one who actually turned up to work the morning the barricades went up around the city. It was like any other day, until it wasn't. Most of her colleagues traveled in from out of town, so they'd presumably been turned away at the cordon. Lucky them. Remarkably, she'd had no trouble at all, until earlier that evening. The office was stocked with food and drink from a recent party, the new girl's 30th. There was plenty of cake and small cans of cider, plus snacky bits and water. Most of the 10th floor was undergoing renovations, so the small office she worked in was tucked out of the way. Forgotten. Invisible. The perfect hiding place. She was ready to wait it out until help arrived. Her luck ran out, however, when she accidentally discovered an old but still functioning PA system and created enough feedback to alert the whole building. The rumbling of infected had followed soon after. This fire door was her only escape, and it was fucking locked. Cassandra launched herself into it again, barely moving it a millimeter. Flustered, she looked over to the wall on the left, noticing a keypad. Who the fuck puts a keypad on an emergency exit? Fumbling for her phone, she swiped through her notes app to see if she'd written the code down. There was no signal still, but having her charger in a plug socket had kept her from going mad since being trapped inside. She'd been able to read books and look through old videos. Nothing. Fucking nothing. She kicked and screamed, slamming the metal as the thunderous roar of infected approached, swarming the stairwell below. Then, an idea popped into her head. The office building was notorious for being lax on all things security and upkeep. She often saw Helen from accounts smoking weed out back via the broken fire door. So she punched in the first code that came into her head. 1, 2, 3, 4. A green dot beeped, releasing the lock mechanism. It was fucking hilarious. Or it would have been, had she not been running away from a group of deranged strangers intent on ripping her to shreds. Just like she'd seen through the window. That poor family. So much blood. So many limbs. A rush of wind tore through the stairwell as Cassandra lunged onto the rooftop. The city was blanketed in darkness. A few well-placed lanterns on top of the building, the only respite from the dark. A flickering emergency light pulsed by the exit as she fought to slam the door, eventually securing it with mere seconds to spare. One of the infected careened into the door on the other side. The blunt thud was joined by a rattle of others, testing the limits of the frame. Cassandra looked over at the emergency staircase attached to the edge of the building and instantly recoiled. Even in relative darkness, she could see how rickety that thing looked. A metal frame bolted onto the facade of an old office block. What could go wrong? To her knowledge, it hadn't been tested in years. Ungodly sounds spewed from the other side of the door. The metal started to bulge, brick dust shaking from the hinges. A screw blew from the corner, releasing the plate. Fuck. In less than 10 seconds, the entire door gave way, tearing from the brick. Without any hesitation, the group poured out, each taking their own path towards Cassandra. She turned and sprinted to the edge of the rooftop, unwilling to look back, even for a second. A putrid scent caught the air, a heavy whiff of rot and spoiled meat. She had to watch where she was going to make sure she didn't trip or just walk off the edge of the building. With a jolting clash, Cassandra jumped onto the stairs, which shuddered from the impact. Trying not to get twisted in the metal barrier, she carefully stepped over the guardrail, planting her feet on the top step. One of the infected screamed. The others responded with deep, nonsensical vocalizations. The frontrunner of the pack completely misjudged the space and ran off the roof, tumbling into an awkward freefall. At least a dozen followed, all locked onto Cassandra and her less than impressive escape plan. Hesitantly, Cassandra descended the first set of stairs, settling on the landing at the next floor. The emergency escape was laid out in a crisscross pattern of short stairwells, like those you'd find attached to New York apartment blocks. She'd always hated the idea of having to use one, but like many things in her life recently, she didn't have a choice. A rush of infected bounced into the guardrail, violently shaking the metal. The vibration rippled down the stairwell, forcing Cassandra to brace. The first of the bunch launched himself over the rail and onto the landing, before sprinting down towards her. In anticipation of his attack, she launched her body into his, causing him to fold over the railing and plunge into the abyss. Before she could look back, there were 5 more on her trail. Cassandra choked, trying to catch her breath, then hopped down to the next landing, closely followed by the enraged group. She wished she had a weapon. She wished she wasn't so high up in the fucking air. With a jolt of adrenaline, she picked up pace, barely touching each step as she flew down the staircase. Floor by floor, she was getting closer to the ground. Bodies flew past her from above, blurred silhouettes tumbling from the stairwell, casualties of the sheer number of bodies surging down the narrow space. Cassandra couldn't give up. She wouldn't. Sliding her hand across the railing for guidance, a sharp fragment of metal sliced through her palm. Cassandra felt blood trickle from the wound, the skin growing warm and moist. The horde got louder, screeching wails hanging in the air as she ran for her life. At the next landing, one of the infected caught up. With a riotous cackle, a woman in a business casual shirt and skirt combo pounced on Cassandra, slamming her into the railing. "Get away from me!" she screamed, before attempting her best shot at a right hook. Her fist landed, crumpling the woman's cheek and launching her back into the stairs. Cassandra grabbed the railing to descend the next set of stairs, but something was wrong. The entire structure shifted away from the building slightly, before colliding back into it. A cavernous tremor rolled through the metalwork, as more and more strangers flooded onto the stairs. Another pair were gaining on her now, stumbling step by step, almost tripping over each other in anticipation of their hunt. "Fuck off!" Cassandra screamed, heart racing, palms sweaty. The gash on her hand was painful, ringing with agony. It was hopeless. A thunderous rumble sounded and the staircase juddered, followed by a loud snap. The entire structure shifted, throwing Cassandra down the next stairwell, landing in an awkward pile. Another crack. Cassandra looked up. The top of the emergency escape had come apart from the building. Shit! She leapt to her feet, shoes slamming against the metal. Crack! A wave of dust cascaded down onto her. The structure shifted again, pulling away from the wall. She was at least 6 floors up still. With a terrifying shriek, one of the infected leapt from behind, hurtling into her back. "No!" she screamed, but it was too late. The monstrosity of a man dug his teeth into her shoulder as she turned to face him, tearing a chunk from her flesh. An indescribable heat burned through her upper back, nerves firing. With all the strength she could muster, she walloped the man in the face with her elbow, striking until she had him at the railing. Then, with a momentous shove, she discarded him to the street below. His body imploded, a storm of guts and gore bursting up then raining back down onto his corpse. Crack! With a deep breath, Cassandra accepted her fate. She was bitten now, and by all accounts, that meant she was fucked. She didn't want to be one of those things. With a final boom, bolts flew from the brickwork and the structure collapsed. A tangle of metal and bodies sent into freefall. The floor disappeared from beneath her, and Cassandra could do nothing but scream. The infected swiped past at an impossible speed. The broken metal from above gained momentum, heading straight for her. fuck. A large sheet of steel struck her head. Despite that, she was still conscious. All the way to the ground, where everything ended in a sickly eruption of flesh and fluid. In her last moments, she heard the sound on the loudspeaker in the distance change. Instead of birdsong and weird techno tunes, it morphed into a voice. Do not sleep. If you have come into contact with the infected, then everything shut down and went black. Chapter 1. Charles. They're right behind us, Alice yelled. Charles's vision was blurry. The road ahead was dim, only a few tungsten-hued street lamps for visibility. He could hardly keep his eyes open. He was so fucking exhausted. Not just that, but the gurgling in his stomach was joined by an agonizing wave of pain, like hot pokers penetrating his gut. He wasn't sure if he wanted to vomit or pass out, but neither of those options would work right now. I'm going as fast as I can, Charles replied, clearing his throat. In the rearview mirror, he could see the silhouettes of 10 or so people, clumsily darting after the vehicle. One wrong move could cause him to stall the car, and to say his driving experience was negligible would be putting it nicely. There were so many things to focus on, so many tiny errors that could cost them their lives. There must be somewhere we can turn off, Alice growled. They'd been driving since Olive's house, round and round without any kind of real plan, just trying to decompress. But now they'd caught the attention of this crowd. They were grasping for some kind of next step. I have an idea, Charles beamed. It's risky. Do it, Alice replied, flustered. Quickly checking that he and Alice had their seatbelts on, Charles readied his plan. He started to gently compress the brake. Okay, if this is the plan, maybe don't do it, Alice said. Trust me. The crowd gained on the vehicle, nearly within touching distance. Then Charles sped back up, roaring away from them. By the sound of their tortured screams, they were pissed. Once enough distance was put between them, Charles forced the vehicle to a halt, squeezing the brakes as hard as possible. They both jolted forwards, Alice nearly smacking her head on the dashboard. Then Charles tried to pull the gear stick into reverse. It's not working, he cried. What do you mean? Charles yanked on the stick. It wouldn't move. It's not moving. Fuck! Are you pressing the clutch down? What? Charles asked. The clutch. You need to push it down to change gears. I've been doing that, but to reverse too? Just do it! Alice screamed. Charles did so, swiping the gear stick into reverse. Okay, go! I thought you couldn't drive, Charles said. I know how to, I just don't, she said. Let's go! He steadily brought his foot off the clutch whilst compressing the accelerator, waiting for it to bite. And it did. Hold on! The vehicle hurtled backwards, carelessly bombing towards the crowd. Instead of dispersing, they carried on running, if anything forming a tighter formation. Bracing for impact, Charles stiffened his body. Smack! A heavy slap reverberated through the trunk of the car, coinciding with a spray of thick blood on the rear window. One of the passenger windows shattered, not ideal, but the car was still in motion, mowing down the infected behind them. Then Charles stopped the car. He stared out of the window, turning to look at the road behind, too. I think we got them all, Alice said. Somehow? Charles caught his breath, then unclipped his seatbelt. What are you doing? Alice asked. Wait here a minute. Charles reached over to the back seat and grabbed his bag, which was heavily scuffed from various adventures. He pulled out the knife Olive gave him, still wrapped in the DIY sheath. The girl's face kept flashing in his mind. Her excitable smile and no-nonsense resting bitch face. He recalled someone telling him that was the name for the expression. His heart ached. He chucked the bag into the back seat. Jumping out of the car, Charles ignored the pain, both physical and mental, and set his sights on any of those things that might still be alive. Charles, get back in the car! It's not safe! Charles ignored her, walking up the road, studying the crumpled bodies on the floor. One of them was still writhing, eyes open and as rage-filled as any he'd seen. Without a moment's hesitation, he lifted the knife with an overhand grip and slammed it down into the infected's head. On the first day of all this, he'd felt guilt, regret. All the emotions you probably should feel when taking an innocent stranger's life. But now he didn't feel any of those things. Regardless of the infection or whatever it was, he couldn't describe these people as innocent. Not when he saw how much damage they were inflicting. The idea of being good for good's sake was wearing thin, and if he was to survive, and indeed help this new girl survive too, he'd have to blunt some of his emotions. He was already well on the way. Charles walked back to the car, cleaned his knife on his jeans and slumped back into the chair. Are you okay? Alice asked, sensing something was up. Charles would have answered had it not been for the disgusting surge of vomit pushing up his windpipe. He jumped back up, bent double, and hacked a wash of gritty, dark red vomit onto the road. It kept coming, thick, coffee-grained spew which tasted like metal and eggs. "Are you infected?" Alice pressed, before he'd even stopped being sick. Charles tried to shake his head, but instead put his hand up in defense. Wait. When he was sure it was all out of his system, he reached into his pocket for a tissue and wiped the remnants from his face. "No," he answered simply, climbing back into the car. "Can you get my bag for me?" Alice stared at him for a moment, assessing. "I'm happy to strip down and show you I'm not bitten," he said, frustrated. Alice shook her head. "No need for that. I believe you." "But what was that?" Charles gestured to the back seat. Alice took the hint and grabbed his bag for him, resting it on his lap. "I'm sick, but pre-outbreak sick, before any of this happened." "Shit. I'm sorry." "Don't be," Charles said, rifling through his bag. He needed some painkillers right now. He couldn't remember if he'd taken any of his other medicine recently, so he planned to pop one of those too. "They're not here," Charles sighed. "What aren't?" "My pills. Shit. My bag spilled open at the house. I must have missed them in the darkness." Alice took a deep breath. "Then we need to find a pharmacy or something, get you back to full health." Charles smiled gently. "The painkillers are keeping me ticking over, but I'm not getting any better than this, I'm afraid." Alice didn't have to say anything. Charles knew what she was thinking. "I'll get some pills somewhere. I'm fine. I just need to rest." Alice nodded. Charles didn't think she believed his words any more than he did. She said she was a journalist. Weren't they meant to have some kind of instinct when it came to these things? "We can't go to a pharmacy. They've already been looted," Charles mumbled. "Olive and I saw one on the way. It's a no-go." Alice sighed deeply. "Okay, so what else? Let's think. Supermarket?" Charles shook his head. "That's the first place people would have gone." "I'm fine, honestly." Alice stopped him. "Nope, you're not dying on me. It sounds selfish, but I'm not doing this alone. I hate this city and would quite like to get what I came for and get out with my life." Charles laughed. "I'm not joking," Alice teased playfully. "Oh, I can tell. Well, in that case, you better tell my body to stop fucking around and let us get on." Alice smiled, swiping some hair out of her face. Charles looked back at the road. The area seemed familiar. He'd spent years walking from street to street, corner to corner. It was probably safe to say that he'd recognize any random square foot in Egglemore by now, even in relative darkness. No, it was more than that. "I think I know this place," Charles said. "It looks like an industrial estate up ahead, maybe?" Alice offered. Charles shook his head, thinking. Then he remembered. "There's a care home not far from here." "What care home?" Alice asked, thrown off. Charles started the engine and slid into first gear. "I'm getting the hang of it now," he joked. Alice nodded, then bluntly returned to the conversation at hand. "Care home? Last year I had some treatment at the hospital. They didn't have beds, so they sent me to recover at this home to keep me off the streets." "The streets? You're homeless, yeah. These past few days are the most I've been indoors for years. Also the most company I've kept." Alice was warming up now, Charles could tell. He had instincts of his own, after all. "And there are pills there, ones you could take. There are painkillers, and honestly, that's all I need. Whatever's rotting inside me is past saving, but I still have a few miles left in me." "I guess that's the plan then," Alice beamed. "But I don't want to take you away from your work," Charles assured. "If you like, you can take the car and leave me there. I won't drag you down." Alice cleared her throat. "There's no chance in hell I'm going to lifelong on my own, so feel free to die, but plan it for a few days' time if you don't mind." She laughed, smiling wide. Charles returned the gesture. They were back on the road with a new plan and a flickering light of hope. Charles felt extremely grateful for that. Chapter 2. Maggie. "You have 1 minute to tell me why you're here, then you're going," Maggie spat. Ross chuckled at her, his boyish features at odds with his rough, cold exterior. 1 minute isn't a long time, Maggie. It's Miss Bunton, to you." Ross's lips grew into a deep snarl. "No, I don't think it is." Maggie stepped over to the kitchen counter and poured herself a glass of water. Ross sat at the table, tapping his fingers. "I hope this doesn't count as part of my 1 minute." Maggie downed the glass and made another. And I'm still waiting for my water too, Ross said. Maggie stared at him for a few moments, finishing her drink. She sucked the rim as she took the glass away from her mouth and filled it up halfway. Here, she said, pushing the used glass towards him. Be my guest. Ross sighed deeply. Surely you're not going to make me go back out there? It's pitch black. You shouldn't have been here in the first place. That's on you, Maggie countered. You're going to make a teenager go out there alone? You're 18, Ross, hardly a child. Maggie sat down at the table opposite him. Her body was on fire, aches and pains in muscles she hadn't felt for decades, but she wouldn't let Ross see any weakness. Why did your dad send you over here, huh? Maggie asked. He knows I have a restraining order on your whole family. Ross sat up in the chair, wiping the rim of the water glass with his hand. Then he took a big sip, drawing out the time. He's dead. Him, Mum, my sister. I don't believe you, Maggie snarled. Okay, he said simply. So what do you want? His eyes popped, when he was attacked. Mr. Richardson from next door, lovely man, came in and poked my dad's eyes out with his fingers, then tried to bite his face off. Maggie leaned in closer. I don't believe you, Ross countered, leaning in. I don't care if you do, because you know what happened next? He went into my sister's room, grabbed her, and threw her out of the window. I live on the 12th floor, Maggie. Maggie stopped, analyzing the boy. Lies were all his family knew, but all she really wanted to know was why he had turned up on her doorstep. Why here, Ross? I'm sorry if all that is true, but it's got nothing to do with me or Claire. Ross burst into a fit of high-pitched laughter, staring at Maggie directly in the eyes as he did so. It was unnerving. It put her back up. This has got everything to do with you, Maggie. You destroyed my whole family. Maggie took a deep breath in. I want you out of here, she warned. Now. She pushed her chair back, ready to get up. Ross slammed his fist against the table, his cool exterior shattering. Why won't you admit it? Ross asked. Admit what? That what you did to my mum and my dad was wrong. You never said sorry. Sorry? For what? Buying their business? Ross jumped up, his chair hurtling to the ground. You bankrupted us, Ross screamed, slamming his hand down again. No, Ross. Sit down. Maggie pulled her seat back in. After a moment of hesitation, Ross followed. When David and I had Claire, we were best friends with your parents. I was in tech, so was your dad. We had a lot in common. We did everything together for years, but when he started drinking, it all unraveled. I bought his company to help him out. Give him a lifeline. Don't fucking say that, Ross warned, his eyes dark and unwavering. I did. He was in no position to run a business. He was hardly looking after you and your sister, let alone that. How much did you make when you sold everything? All of the little business you hoovered up into your conglomerate. That's not how it works, Maggie argued. And I have no time to explain the ins and outs of my business to you. We lost everything. We had to move from our 4-bed to an estate in Egglemore. Do you know how dangerous it's been? How uncomfortable we've been? I'm sorry, Ross, but we used to take a weekly drive, right, in the car. We'd all go through Longsville, passing all the big houses and farms. Then we'd pass your house, only quickly. We knew you'd probably be watching from your camera. My dad said that one day we'd have this house. We'd come and take it from you. Somewhere safe to live, not worrying about getting stabbed or having our flat broken into every other week. That would be your comeuppance. Maggie took a deep breath. Ross was getting agitated. I didn't want any of this, Maggie sighed. Your dad forced me to get a restraining order with his behavior. I thought it had all stopped. For you, it did, not for me. Maggie? Todd interrupted from the other room. Everything okay? It's fine, Todd. Then she turned back to Ross. I'm sorry if what I did hurt your family, okay? And I'm sorry that they were taken from you in that way. Maggie needed to get this boy out of her house. £20,000 you gave him, Ross started. For all of his work, ideas, what were we meant to do with that? Maggie pushed her chair back. This conversation was over. Your dad was a drunk. He should have used it to get clean and build something better. He probably spunked it on beer. Sorry, we're done here. I'm not explaining myself to you. Ross chuckled. You didn't ask what happened to my mum. What? Maggie asked, frustrated. I told you about my dad and my sister. You didn't ask me about Mum. Go ahead, Maggie spat. Enlighten me. Ross stood up, clicking his neck. She was weak. You probably knew that. Didn't have a single original thought in her head. And, well, those things didn't kill her. I did. Maggie's skin prickled, the static running through her spine. What did you say? I killed her. Because she wouldn't come here with me. I mean, talk about a perfect opportunity, right? No police, no people to see us. Just perfect. Everything we'd discussed on our drives around town. Maggie looked over at the kitchen. The knife block was tucked into the corner. It would only take a few seconds to get there. Would it be enough? Get out of my house right now, Maggie warned. No, he answered, simply, sneering. Maggie nodded. Okay. Todd, get my shotgun? Ross started laughing again, his squeaky voice in terrifying contrast to his apathetic face. Todd appeared from around the corner, shotgun in hand. Everything okay? Maggie nodded. Oh, yes. She snatched the gun and aimed it at Ross, barely a meter from his chest. Okay, he said, putting his hands above his head playfully. I guess I'll go. But I didn't finish my story. You had over a minute. Be thankful for that. Ross turned slowly and stepped towards the door. Oh, funny thing. He turned back. Maggie was ready to shoot this kid in the face. You know, you came and saw me outside school that one time, a few months back, because I was talking to Claire a lot. Maggie didn't answer. She was at boiling point, using every ounce of effort to stop herself from pulling the trigger. I wasn't trying to make her hate you or anything. We actually have a lot in common. Stop talking right now, Maggie warned. Todd was nervously watching them both, looking ready to jump in should it get messy. She likes Korean music. I like the TV shows. We both grew up in Longsville. Until, you know. I'm warning you. He turned back around to face the door with a deep, loud sigh. He grabbed the handle and opened it, idling on the doorstep outside. You need to go, mate, Todd said. She's not fucking around. Ross completely ignored him, rolling his eyes. That's it. Just a bit further, past the gate, Maggie taunted. Ross grinned. I kissed her, he said. I kissed Claire at school 3 times, and she fucking loved it. What did you say? There was a moment of complete silence whilst those words lingered in the air. Then Maggie stormed forwards, the shotgun trained on his head now. Maggie, don't, Todd urged, but Maggie brushed him out of the way. Fucking say that again, I dare you. Ross backed up slightly until he was in the front garden. I said we kissed. 3 times. She is 15 fucking years old, Maggie shrieked. I'm only 18, Ross said. And I promise I'll wait until she is too, before we do anything without our clothes. Maggie pelted him around the face with the barrel of the gun. He fell to the floor like the sack of shit he was. For a moment, she thought she might have killed him. But then he started moving, stumbling back to his feet, hands raised in the air. Last chance, Maggie growled. Then, a light sparked up, quickly followed by a second. Vehicles of some kind just beyond the gate. There was a car, a motorbike. Wait, 2 cars? What is this? Maggie muttered. Another light burst from the darkness. My friends are here, Ross beamed. Chapter 3. Sonia. Where is she? Sonia stormed out of the lab, pushing past Lola and Oswald. Sonia, wait, Lola called out, rushing to catch up. We need to talk. Where? Sonia ordered, her voice low. She felt warmth in her face radiating to her head. Her throat felt like it was closing up. She needed water. There were so many questions swirling around her head. What did they mean? How? When? Sonia twisted around the corner, entering another maze-like corridor. She had no idea what time it was. 10 p.m? Midnight? Time was a blur, just like the hallways, white, clinical, stale. She needed to vomit. No, she just needed water. There was a cafe a few doors down, a small vendor stocking coffees and soft drinks for the workers. Sonia stormed in and grabbed a bottle of water and squeezed it into her mouth, snatching another one and doing the same. Oswald and Lola waited outside the door, staring at her. Where is she? Sonia dropped the empty bottles and raced back out to the corridor, taking the lead. "Sonia, wait." That was Oswald. His voice had a lilt, an unusual tone. It wasn't normal. "You said the morgue?" Sonia asked, speeding up. There weren't many workers around at this time of night. A couple of cleaners and a small team working on a rolling 24-hour schedule, tracking the outbreak and any major events. Everyone else was in their apartments, asleep. Just like Olive. No, she wasn't asleep. She said she was safe, outside the city. There'd been a mistake. "I'm really close to a breakthrough, so I don't know what all this is. Couldn't it wait?" Sonia asked, directing the question at Oswald without turning to face him. "Sonia, slow down and wait. Sonia!" She called for the elevator, then paced back and forth impatiently. It was taking too long. "We'll take the stairs," she decided, charging onto the stairwell. "Dr. Sawyer, wait a minute! Why was Lola always just there?" She heard the pitter-patter of Lola and Oswald's frantic footsteps behind her. She needed a head start so she could think, a bit of space, some clarity. Everything felt really blurry again. "I really don't know what you're saying," Sonia called out. Her voice echoed around the tiled stairwell. It sounded shakier than she expected. At the top of the stairwell, she pushed through the doors, barely stopping to take a breath. She needed an answer. Where is she? Now they were too far behind her. She turned and waited, just as they got to the landing. "Sonia, go. Take me." She gestured for them to take the lead. "Go." They turned to each other, uncertain. Sonia needed to stop for a moment. Her heart felt tense, twisted. If she stopped for too long, she wouldn't start walking again. So she went. Oswald took the lead. Lola held back a bit, awkwardly lingering between the two of them, just like she always did. It looked like she wanted to say something. Sonia hoped she didn't. Oswald stopped at the door to the morgue. "Don't stop. Go," Sonia pressed. "Sonia. Go!" Sonia screamed. An awkward pause. "Sonia," Oswald started, his voice gentle. "There was a fire. No one knew until one of our cars passed by. 30 minutes later." Sonia shook her head. She was being crushed from the inside, an immense pressure, dread, foreboding, grief. One or all of those things. Sonia lunged at the handle and was screaming before she even saw her daughter's body. A lump of burnt flesh that used to be Olive. She shrieked until her vocal cords threatened to sever. Chapter 4. Maggie. "They're armed," Ross warned. "Maggie, put the gun down," Todd said from somewhere behind her. Then, "Mum? What's going on?" Maggie couldn't even face her daughter right now. "Tell them to go, Ross," Maggie said. Ross smirked. It would be so easy to shoot. Instead, she cocked the shotgun up to the air. "You have 3 seconds to get away," she screamed. 3. "We're not going anywhere, Maggie," Ross sniggered. 2. "Maggie, come inside," Todd ordered. 1. Bang. That wasn't Maggie's gun. She pulled the trigger in response, her body shuddering at the sound. Then a racket of gunfire. Maggie charged back into the house, slamming the door. She wasn't hit. Neither were Todd or Claire. "Stop shooting!" Ross screamed from outside. "Mum? Ross?" Claire ran towards the door. Todd caught her mid-pace, grabbing her around the shoulders. She squirmed, trying to fight from his grip. Maggie jumped over the table, sprawling to grab a couple more shells. "Claire, no!" She broke away from Todd, heading for the door. "Claire!" Maggie screamed. Claire hit the keypad and opened the door. "Stop shooting!" Ross screamed again. The sound stopped. Claire ran out front. Maggie followed, loading the shells. "Ross?" Claire mumbled. The tone of her voice had changed, grown more uncertain. Claire had her hands up. Ross had a knife to her throat. Maggie lifted the shotgun, pointing it at the sky. "Ross, wait a minute," Maggie started. "I won't hurt her. But we are coming in. Go and get your stuff. You're sleeping in the cabin." "Ross, let's talk." "We already tried that, Maggie," he cackled. Claire squirmed, a look of betrayal painted on her face. Ross turned to her, the knife still touching her skin. "I won't hurt you. I'll explain everything, okay?" "Get away from her," Maggie interrupted. "Get some clothes and water. You're going to disarm everything and stay in the cabin from now on. We'll talk properly in the morning." "I'm tired." Maggie turned to Todd. He looked as confused as she felt. There was no right move in this situation. They needed time to think. "And him?" Ross called. "He's with us." Todd shook his head. "I'm not doing that," he replied, an anxious lilt to his voice. Ross tightened his grip on Claire, pushing the knife against her skin. "Please, no!" she wailed. "Stop it! He'll do it." "Todd will come," Maggie said. Todd turned to her, shaking his head again. "I'm not leaving you out there. I need someone in the house," she whispered. "We're not letting them do this." Chapter 5. Rowan. It was fucking bright. The car he'd hijacked from the old man lasted all of about 5 hours. He'd got lost and gone round in circles, trying to avoid the rabid fuckers running around outside. I'm not becoming one of them. Rowan felt drowsy, like a drug was slowly taking effect. He wasn't sure if it was the tiredness or the fucking gash on his shoulder, which had only recently stopped bleeding. The old guy had packed a couple of t-shirts in the car, alongside other bits in a duffel bag. Rowan had ripped one up and packed his wound, just like he was taught back in the day. Now he was on the edge of the road, in the middle of an industrial estate. On the opposite side, there was a dated cafe which attracted all the local tradies, a mishmash of builders, plumbers, and the like. Rowan had stopped by a few times when delivering to the food warehouse down one of the long winding roads just by it. Inside, it looked like 2 or 3 people were stumbling around, screaming at nothing, intermittently lunging and trying to fight their shadows. He'd made 2 observations while driving around all night. Firstly, the infected didn't seem to attack each other. They would bump into one another, occasionally scrap and push, but never try to bite or maim. Secondly, they wouldn't stop fucking babbling or screaming. He'd encountered a tricky roadblock around 1 a.m. and listened to a lone infected just scream for 15 minutes, just wailing on a loop, occasionally delving into a broken mash of words and confused syllables. For that reason, he'd taken to calling them screamers. Rowan was hesitating. He could take on 3 screamers no problem, but the situation in front of him posed a big dilemma. If they tried to attack him, great. It might mean the infection didn't spread when he was bitten. But if they left him alone, just a quick glance or shove, he was as good as dead. Rowan had made observations and acquired a very rudimentary understanding of what was going on, but the science was blurry. If he had the infection, his time was running out, and he needed a very quick fucking plan on what to do. He wasn't going to let a woman take the piss out of him in his final days, especially not someone like Alice, a user, a manipulator, someone who takes you for a ride and convinces you to let your guard down a little. Not now. Never again. He turned off the engine, letting it sputter and die. The last of the fuel had been spent, and the engine had been making a loud rattle for at least 20 miles. It was ready for the scrap heap. Rowan took a deep breath, twitching at the sharp pain in his shoulder. His feet were restless. His body was in a cold sweat. He had to find out right fucking now. He pushed the door open and stumbled out, correcting his balance before continuing to the cafe. The door was locked from the outside with a chain and combination lock. The numbers were covered in dried glue, suggesting whoever put the lock there knew the inhabitants were infected. Probably made a run for it just after. Probably didn't make it half a mile. Rowan grabbed a brick from the crumbling half-wall by the pavement and smashed it into the lock. After a few attempts, it snapped off, tumbling to the ground. The trio of screamers rushed to the dusty window, slapping their hands and faces on the glass. Was it a good sign? Rowan took a final moment before yanking the handle. The screamers edged around a glass divider inside and lunged for Rowan, teeth bared, eyes hungry with bloodlust. The first one bolted into him, a middle-aged guy with a high-vis vest and a considerable gut. Rowan stumbled backwards, fighting for purchase. Then the guy stopped. His nostrils flared, mouth hung open in stasis. I'm not one of you. Rowan kept repeating the line over and over in his head. Come at me. I'm not one of you. Then the other voice, the deeper, more twisted one, the one that took up space and mimicked the sound of his dad. A shattered memory, manifesting as intrusive thoughts and insults. Maybe you are. Rowan screamed, just as the chubby builder pounced. His fist smacked Rowan in the nose, putting him off balance. Rowan shook it off, grabbing for the man's vest while keeping an eye on the other 2. In a dizzied frenzy, Rowan snatched the builder's shoulders and hooked one of his legs, throwing him with a simple judo move. Another lunged at him with one arm forward, which Rowan grabbed and twisted, forcing him to the ground. The third one was a complete replica of the first two. Same height, same weight, lack of hair. They were complete stereotypes. Either way, he had a hammer, and Rowan only noticed when it was an inch from his head. The metal caught his eyebrow, splitting his skin. The man swung again, but Rowan blocked, swiping the tool from his hand. As blood cascaded down his cheek, he forced the screamer onto the floor with an arm lock, belly down on the concrete. Rowan kept him in the lock, then shoved his boot on the back of the screamer's neck, transferring his weight on top of him. With an aggressive grunt, he jolted the arm up, hard. He felt the vertebrae snap, and the man stopped moving. He piled the hammer into the other one's heads until they were dead on the floor too. The roar of his thoughts was drowned out as a car sped past, going at least 50 miles an hour. Something was being dragged behind it, a blur of beige and red, secured by a rope. Wait, was that a person? Not a person. A screamer. Ripping across the tarmac, it was being dragged by a noose around its neck, flesh peeled by friction. A bloody trail ran the distance behind them, a crimson marker of the journey. Suddenly, the noose snapped, sending the body hurtling in a disgusting roll of broken bone and mangled flesh. The largest piece of the mutilated corpse came to a stop right by Rowan's foot. The rest was scattered across the landscape. The mystery car stopped up the road. It reversed back to the cafe, and the driver wound down the window. "Hey, sorry about that." Rowan shook his head, leaning to look in the car. Two men, both late 30s at a guess. "Not a problem. Did they get you?" The passenger gestured to the dead bodies on the floor. "Your shoulder. It's bleeding." "Shit." "No, I got that before. Anyway, on your way." "So you're bit?" "I'm not looking for trouble," Rowan mumbled. "Neither are we, man." The passenger got out of the car. "I'm Carlos. This is Jamil." Rowan studied the man as Jamil stepped out too. They were dressed in everyday clothes but carried themselves differently. Military? Security? "We're both infected as well." Carlos turned, revealing a nasty laceration on his hip. Jamil revealed his own wound on his bicep. "I was in the middle of the hospital when it happened. Jamil was at work." Rowan nodded. He didn't know what they wanted with him, but they were lingering. He just saw them drag a screamer across the road by its throat. The smell of burnt flesh was still attacking his nostrils. He wasn't letting his guard down that easily. "Those things that attack me, I don't think they attack other infected," Rowan suggested, desperate for an answer to his dilemma. Carlos shook his head. "They only leave you if you turned. You know, crazy, running around trying to bite everyone and shit. It's like they know." Shit. Rowan thought he might have got away with it. "Where are you headed?" Rowan asked, changing the subject. Jamil stepped forward this time. "We're staying at the nightclub, a mile or so that way. The music's on 24/7. We're helping each other stay awake." "I don't know how much you know about the infection," Carlos added. "We have this science guy with us. He knows some stuff. Main thing? Don't go to sleep. It's how it takes hold, if you're infected." Rowan had been piecing it together bit by bit, a mix of observation and snippets of conversations he'd heard. He was glad he hadn't tried to sleep yet. After several days of no proper rest, he was flagging. It also explained the looping sounds he'd been hearing through the night. They had become background noise by now, but it made sense they were being used to keep people awake. By his estimation, they'd have to have set up hundreds of speakers to cover the whole city properly. "What about you?" Jamil asked, breaking him away from his train of thought. "I'm looking for someone," Rowan said simply. "My girlfriend. We got separated." "Fuck, mate. Sorry to hear it." It was a lie, of sorts. In his head, things were going to be very different. He'd imagined a life with Alice, despite knowing nothing about her really. She destroyed any chance of that. "We're heading back to the club now." "You're welcome to join us," Carlos said. Rowan considered it for a moment. He didn't have a working vehicle, nor any food or water. It would be the sensible thing to do. "There's somewhere I need to check first. I need to see if she's there." "Do you know the Lifelong building?" He wouldn't stop looking for her, not if it took all night. The city wasn't that big in the grand scheme of things. With a little help, it might be even easier. "It's swarmed. The gates are 3 deep with ragers." "Ragers?" Rowan said. "You know, the things, the crazy ones," Jamil offered. Rowan laughed. "I call them screamers." Carlos nodded. "I get it. Look, let us take you as far as we can go, and the offer stands. If you want to come stay after, we need more men." "You wouldn't mind?" Rowan asked. Jamil opened the back door on his side. "Least we can do, after getting your boots dirty." Rowan laughed. There was an awful splatter of guts on his trousers, but he couldn't tell which corpse they were from. He got inside, forcing his frame into the tiny space. Sorry, it's not bigger, Carlos joked. That's what I used to say to my wife, Rowan joked, causing them both to howl with laughter. These were good people to have on side. Suggestible. Transparent. What's the story about that guy? Rowan asked, referring to the body they'd been pulling behind the car. We figure, if our time is coming to an end, Jamil started, then we should right some wrongs, serve some justice to the people who made our lives hell. It's only right, Carlos teased. I got my ex. You dragged her behind the car, Rowan asked, his interest spiked. Nah, we threw her from the roof. Was she infected? Rowan asked. Well, that's the thing. Our science guy had a theory that even though we haven't turned, we can still transmit the virus. Rowan frowned. Right. So I got her cheating ass in the club and tested it out. Cut her thigh, deep gash, then sliced my hand. Let the blood pour in, pushed it deep with my fingers. You should have heard her scream. Rowan looked out the window. A lone screamer was pinned against a building by a forklift. He was still alive, writhing and confused. Then, we let her sleep. And? Rowan asked, returning to the conversation. Lo and behold, she turned. She wasn't bitten or anything, hadn't even been in contact with the infected before that. What about the guy? Rowan asked. The guy? The one she cheated on you with? Carlos smirked. Is his juice all up your trousers? Rowan smirked. He was definitely going to get on with these guys. Chapter 6. Alice. They'd slept for a few hours in the car. Once Alice was certain Charles hadn't been bitten, she let herself drift off for a bit. She woke in a panic. Sure, there was a crowd of infected outside the car, clawing their way through the metal. It was just a dream. They'd arrived outside the care home early in the morning. It was barricaded with wooden planks, nailed across the doors and windows. It had been far too dark to try and get in, especially without any idea what was waiting for them on the other side. They were both exhausted too, so it made sense to try and get their energy up a bit. Charles didn't look too good. His skin had paled to a strange grey, but he was alive and snoring. God, he could snore. Hey, we should go now. Her voice roused him awake. He wiped his face, drool swiping across his beard. How long were you asleep? A few hours, I think. Charles looked outside the window and up at the sky. It's about 9 a.m. You're right. We should move. They had found a corner of the car park surrounded by tall bushes, presumably grown to hide the bins behind. It had made a perfect hiding spot, but in the cold light of day, it was nowhere near as disguised. Alice stepped out and headed over to the care home. It was an ugly 80s-era monstrosity of a building, plain brick and absolutely no passion in the design. Charles followed closely behind. We need to get you a weapon, he said, joining her side. She looked over to him. He had a knife in a makeshift sheath, a tea towel or something, that would prove quite handy. It wouldn't hurt for her to pick something up. Wait a second. I'll take a look out here, she said. There was plenty of debris surrounding the home, but nothing particularly sharp or heavy. She wanted something that could cause some damage without it weighing her down. Alice remembered covering a protest in London when she was studying at university, where the rioters had armed themselves with all manner of things from the area. Baseball bats, plant pots, street signs. At the time, she thought it was ridiculous. How far was someone going to get with a plant pot faced with riot shields and batons? But now, with the city in tatters and little more than a jacket and a dead mobile phone on her person, she'd take a plant pot any day of the week. Luckily for her, she wouldn't have to go digging around the local area to find something. Nestled in the long grass at the side of the home were a pair of lightweight garden shears. Alice picked them up. They had long handles with sharp 6-inch blades at the top. Whoever was meant to be landscaping had obviously forgotten them, or hadn't had a chance to grab them before all this. These will do, Alice assured, snapping the blades together. Charles nodded, smiling. His skin was still pale, his movements were awkward, but he was focused. At the front door, they had another challenge to overcome. A series of wooden planks had been nailed across the entryway and front windows, solid and secure. Alice tried to maneuver the shears into the gap, pry away the wood, but they weren't strong enough. She didn't want them to snap before she even had a chance to use them, so that wasn't going to work. There must be something around, Charles muttered. They scoured the area, looking for something of use, a hammer, crowbar, something like that. Aside from broken brick, glass, and litter, there wasn't much of anything around. Shit, Charles groaned. This isn't good. Alice shook her head. We just need to find a different way in. There's always a way. They spent the next half hour scouting the building and the surrounding area. When they were close to calling it a day and going back to the car in search of another place, Alice spotted a basement window round back. Do you think you'll fit? Charles asked. The gap wasn't huge, but neither was Alice. She had a naturally svelte figure, and with a bit of a push, she reckoned she could squeeze through. I can get in and find something to help you get through the front, she said, sizing up the gap. If you're sure. I'm sure. Alice approached the window, only a few inches above ground. The window would lead directly into the basement and whatever horrors were waiting in there. Alice was anything but sure about this plan, but waiting outside was an even worse idea. She needed more information for her story, because if she was going to try and take down a multinational company, she needed plenty of evidence to back it up with. Alice had risked her life and probably racked up enough trauma for a lifetime of therapy at this point. She wasn't going to let Lifelong get away with what they'd done to Egglemore, or the countless heinous crimes of their past, including the one that killed her brother. Smash! The glass gently shattered, falling into the room. She kicked the fragmented edges out, leaving just the frame. On second thoughts, it really was fucking tight. What'd you think? Charles asked. I think it's our best shot, she answered, crouching to look through the gap. Doesn't seem to be anyone in there. She got onto her knees, the soft grass compressing beneath her. Turning to get her legs in first, she slid herself into the right position. Here goes. With a heave, she pushed back, her legs crossing the threshold. She carried on until her hips were through the gap, feet dangling in search of a surface. Everything okay? Charles asked. Alice grunted in response. Eventually, her feet caught a side table or something. It felt secure. With her arms over her head, she heaved back, letting gravity do the hard work. I think I've got it, she said, fighting to get her shoulders through. Suddenly, the table she was standing on swayed. Alice fought to balance herself, but it was too late. The surface slid out from beneath her and she dropped several feet, crashing into the ground. Alice! Charles screamed from outside. She landed awkwardly on top of a small desk. A computer tower and monitor were crumpled beneath it. I'm okay, she called out before lowering her voice. I'm going to look now. She brushed herself off, rolling to her hands and knees before standing. Nothing was broken, just a few bruises. As soon as she was back up on her feet, she covered her mouth at the putrid scent lingering in the air. It was sickly sweet, thick and heavy. Her stomach gurgled, threatening to vomit. She took a few deep breaths beneath her hand and willed the feeling away. Finally, she could take a proper look around. The damp, dusty basement was littered with random items, all manner of bedding, a few pieces of broken medical equipment, light bulbs, wires, old CD-ROMs. In the corner, there was a blood-stained duvet covering something lumpy. She knew she shouldn't look underneath it, but her curiosity got the better of her. Alice paced over to it, her footsteps slow and deliberate. Glass crunched underneath her feet, the scent getting stronger, overpowering. Then she ripped the duvet off, revealing 3 rotting bodies. She couldn't help it this time, bending over and puking all over the bloated corpses. Alice stood there for a moment, doubled over with strings of saliva dripping from her lips. Alice? Charles called. I'm okay. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and threw the duvet back over. Get your head together. Yes. She needed to get back on track. Leaving the grisly display in her rear view, Alice turned to a wall of drawers and tools. There were only simple things like hammers, screwdrivers and the like, but hidden in the corner, covered in dust and cobwebs, she found what she was looking for. A small crowbar, rusted and ancient. It was only a half-size one, often used for getting up flooring or breaking small padlocks, but it would do the job. She snatched it and headed back over to the window. Charles! He appeared at the gap, on his knees. Take this. She stood on her tiptoes, passing it through the window. He grabbed the shears she'd left on the grass and swapped them with her. I'll make my own way to the front. Let's get what we need and get out of here. Charles headed round, giving Alice a few more minutes to look at what was going on here. That didn't include uncovering those bodies again. She was pretty sure that was burned into her mind now. But something out of place had caught her eye over by the tools. She walked back over, trying to find what had piqued her curiosity again. There it was, In the miscellany of dusty junk, a small file discarded atop one of the drawers. Alice approached hesitantly, her heart racing. Plastered on the front of the document, Property of Lifelong Corporation. Their logo. What the hell did they have to do with this care home? As she backtracked to the window looking for other clues, she noticed the medical equipment was also adorned with the same emblem. By way of a quick last-minute decision leading them to this building, she may have found something of use. Then something rattled deeper in the building, culminating in a huge crash. It must have been Charles. Alice grabbed the file in one hand, shears in the other, and headed to the staircase leading to the ground floor. Chapter 7. Sonia. Sonia didn't sleep. She didn't even go home. How was she meant to dream having seen her daughter on a slab, lifeless and cold? There were too many questions in her head. How did it happen? Where? And why the fuck did she have 2 bullet holes in her head if it was a fire that killed her? Oswald had set a meeting for 10 a.m. He wanted to get all the information before debriefing her, so to speak. So she'd agreed. In his office, she skipped the niceties and encouraged him to just keep talking. "I'm so sorry, Sonia," he said from across the desk. "As a friend and colleague, I can't imagine how this must feel." Sonia nodded. "Where did it happen?" Oswald cleared his throat. "A cabin on Winterley Road. We don't know what it was or why she was there, but it would appear there was a gas leak, and when she opened the door, the whole place exploded." "Is there any camera footage?" she asked. Oswald shook his head. "There were no cameras on site, as far as we know." There were cameras at the cabin, Sonia knew that. She'd had them installed when she first bought the place and often checked back to ensure everything was working and in good order. Her holiday home was the only place she could escape to outside of Lifelong's wide-reaching surveillance, so she made it a habit to stop by and decompress. But why would Olive have gone there? For safety, to keep away from the infection, perhaps. But Olive didn't like Egglemore. She was only home briefly. It would have made as much sense to just escape the city, like she said. There was more to this story. Oswald wasn't looking her in the eyes. "And how exactly did she die?" Sonia asked, her voice wavering. Oswald took a deep breath in, his eyes on the door behind her. Then he looked into her eyes for the first time that meeting. "The explosion knocked her out cold. The fire and smoke inhalation would have been fatal." "So the bullets were just to make sure?" she asked plainly. Oswald sat back in his chair. "Bullets?" "There are 2 bullet holes in her head. I'm guessing the fire didn't cause that?" There was a moment of silence, an awkward, heavy pause. "I don't know about that. Did you know she was bitten?" Oswald asked. Sonia's heart just about stopped. "Bitten?" Oswald nodded. "We couldn't confirm until the coroner had done some tests. There was a bite mark on her shoulder. We can't tell how long it was there." "What are you saying?" Sonia spat. "I'm saying she would have died anyway. Whether a passerby shot her to make sure she was actually dead or stray bullets in the area, I don't know how it happened, but she wouldn't have survived either way." Sonia nodded, her eyes welled with tears. "Is this my fault?" "No, Sonia, it's a tragic... Noxidone was my making. This whole infection..." Sonia stood up and left, slamming the door behind her. She heard Oswald call from behind the door, but he didn't make an effort to chase her this time. Piling into the lab, she ran over to her desktop and loaded up a database of live camera feeds. She typed in the cabin address and checked the recordings for the last 24 hours. Frustratingly, the feed had been cut late in the afternoon and there was no sign of who did it. Her rage was at boiling point. She walked through to the testing area and set her sights on an infected woman she had pinned to a chair. Clumsily, she threw open the door to the small control room and twisted every knob to maximum power. A surge of electrical static burst into the air. Sonia slammed the control room door shut and powered up the screens. Moments later, the room was drowning in sound and strobing light patterns. Sonia sat for 10 minutes before turning it all off, a relentless barrage of audio-visual mayhem. As she stepped back into the lab, she could feel an energy shift. The infected woman was absolutely still. Blood leaked from her ears in steady streams, dark and thick, staining the sides of her neck. But she wasn't thrashing, no violence or rage. She was a blank slate. Sonia approached, grabbing her gun from the locked cabinet in the corner. The woman's eyes were still, but she was alive. "Are you able to speak?" Sonia circled to the front of the woman, stopping a few feet in front of her. As if frozen in time, the only sign of this person actually being alive was a very subtle rise and fall of the shoulders, in time with her breathing. "Do you know where you are?" Sonia raised the gun. "Do you know your name?" The woman sparked back to life, in a way. There was something behind her milky eyes. "Stop." A single word. Sonia couldn't believe it. She rushed back to the control room to switch the cameras on. "Can you say that again?" she asked, tracking back to her. "Say another word." The woman stared at her. "Stop." Jesus. There was something, at least. Sonia rushed over to the door, ready to give the news to Oswald. "Stop." Sonia turned back to the woman. "Stop." "Okay, calm down," Sonia said. "Hurts." Sonia gritted her teeth. "Okay, stop now. I'll try." "Hurts. Stop." The woman screeched and flailed, pulling against the restraints. Whatever Sonia had just achieved burned up in a rage of violent thrashing and nonsense. "Hurts." Bang! Sonia pulled the trigger. The bullet slammed between the infected woman's eyes and sent the chair toppling backwards. There was a knock at the door. Lola. Sonia sighed, pulling it open. "It's London," Lola said. "They need to talk." Chapter 8. Todd. Todd was in the bathroom, sitting on the toilet, sheer panic overwhelming him. Maggie and Claire were sleeping in the cabin. This Ross guy was sleeping on the living room floor with the others, ripping the cushions from the sofa in bedrooms to make themselves comfortable. In just a few hours, they'd turned the place into a pigsty, helping themselves to whatever they wanted and generally just destroying the place. The night had been tough. Todd had offered to keep watch, only to give him some freedom from the group. Ross had recognized him from the estate, which apparently meant they had to stick together. It was the only reason he wasn't out in the cabin too. Claire had really fucked up letting Ross in. Todd knew Maggie would be wringing the shit out of her, metaphorically speaking, so he wasn't going to join in. It would very much be a lesson learnt, a painful one at that. As long as they survived, it wouldn't matter. Something told him Claire would never be hearing the end of it, though. A loud knock made the wooden door shudder. "Todd!" It was Ross. "We're hungry. Go get Maggie." "Just a minute." Todd ran the tap, gulping several handfuls of water. He was desperately trying to formulate a plan in his head, something to keep everyone safe and avoid any kind of fight. The exit plans he'd made when he first arrived were as good as dust now. There were too many people watching. That, and he'd never run out on Maggie, not in a situation like this. His breath was picking up, sweat starting to pool at his back. He was only wearing a t-shirt and shorts, but the air felt warm and stale. Todd needed to find a weapon. A weapon and a plan. Not much time to do either. Just to top it all off, his body was ringing with pain, a wave of soreness spreading from his back to his neck. It was getting to the point he couldn't tell if it was his fibro playing up or if he'd picked up an injury. A harder knock at the door. "Todd!" Todd came out and apologized, saying his stomach was feeling weird, then headed to the front door. He pushed in the code Maggie had shown him and swung it open. "What's the number for that?" Ross asked, dressed in a pink dressing gown he'd found somewhere in the house. "When Maggie's cooked breakfast, I'm going to need all the codes." Todd nodded. He stepped out onto the gravel and started down the path towards the cabin. Trying to remain calm and normal in his movements, he tried to work out how to play this. In his mind, a million scenarios cycled round and round, but none of them ended well. In the end, he decided he'd have to just do it and see what happened next. As he rounded the wall by the cabin, he saw Maggie jump up over to the control panel inside. She released the electronic lock and opened the door. "Todd, are you okay? What's going on?" Todd pressed up to the door. He had a few minutes, no more than that, until someone came to check on him. They didn't know about the basement or the CCTV cameras yet, so it was imperative to start formulating their exit. "And is Ross okay?" Claire mumbled. "I know I've messed up, but are you fucking kidding me?" Maggie snapped, twisting towards her daughter. Is there something wrong with your head? No, he's never like this, Maggie held up her hand. You should stop talking before I really lose my shit, Maggie warned. Todd nodded, trying to hurry them along. We need an escape plan, and we need it yesterday, Todd groaned, keeping his voice low. Ross is going to ask you for the codes to the house after breakfast. And what the hell are they eating for breakfast? Out of my fridge? Cheeky twats. Actually, they've asked me to come get you to make it. Breakfast. I offered, but Maggie raised her eyebrows. You're joking, right? I'm sorry, Maggie. Maggie grabbed a new shirt and went to change in the small cabin bathroom with no further protest. Todd, Claire prompted, her voice a whisper. I really am sorry. Is there anything I can do? Her hands were twisted, rubbing together in a nervous pattern. Before he could answer, the door slid open and Maggie appeared. By the look on her face, she had heard every word. What you can do, Claire, is stop inviting dangerous people into our home. You stay here while I go and make breakfast. Todd turned, quickly saying bye and waiting outside. On his way out, he heard Maggie finishing talking to her. I can't keep you safe if you keep fucking things up for us. That one stung. Todd felt those words in his heart, and it wasn't even directed at him. Maggie joined his side, and with a strut that suggested she was ready to take on the world, they went back to the house. Whilst Maggie fried off the last of some bacon in a pan, Todd started making some mental notes. There were 9 of them, including Ross, all male, from their late teens to early 20s, roughly. They were scattered across the house and living room, popping open bottles of wine they'd found in a cabinet out back. Without drawing too much attention to himself, Todd attempted to study each of their faces for a moment. He was certain that he hadn't talked to any of the boys on the estate, though 1 or 2 of them felt a little familiar. The estate he lived in had hundreds and hundreds of people, and he had made it a mission to stay indoors as much as possible. How Ross even recognized him was a mystery. Do you want bread or rolls? Maggie spat as she slid some frozen items out from the freezer. Ross walked up to her, the pink dressing gown flapping with the movement. The smell of bacon filled the air, and as much as Todd hated to think it, he really hoped he'd be able to have some too. He was absolutely ravenous. Ross teased, pondering the decision. That is a tough decision, Maggie. She turned to him, grabbing the tongs and angrily flipping the bacon. It's really not. Ross smiled, his twisted grin and high-pitched laugh making a return. I'll have one of each. There isn't enough food for that. It's one or the other. Ross drew his head back theatrically, feigning shock and offense. Well, someone's a bit snappy today. Todd saw the way Maggie was holding the tongs and gripping the frying pan to within an inch of its life. Things were about to explode. Ross, you mentioned a tour of the house. I can do that while Maggie cooks if you want. I know the codes and where things are set up. He turned to Todd, nodding. You know, I think that's a good idea. Too many cooks in the kitchen and all that. Maggie exhaled hard, but when she looked over to Todd, there was gratitude in her eyes. Not just that, but in little more than a stare, she was communicating something he was already counting on. Show him around, but don't show him everything. Let's keep a couple of things up our sleeve. Cool, let's go. Justin, you're with us. Ross called over his friend, a lanky guy with tattoos on his neck and face. Though in his early 20s, he was missing a good amount of his teeth. He was the only one that hadn't said a word yet, as far as he knew. And one of you go check Claire in the cabin. Maggie dropped the tongs. There's no need. She's asleep in there. Well, it's daytime now, Maggie, and I want to make sure she isn't planning anything. Don't be fucking stupid. She's the only one here who doesn't want to what? Ross challenged. Maggie shook her head, picking the tongs back up. Let's go, mate, Todd said, ready to take him out of the kitchen. No, he started, walking back over to Maggie. He grabbed her shoulder and twisted her to face him. What the fuck? Ross grabbed a knife from the side and held it to the open flame under the pan. I've asked for some breakfast. That's all. The knife started to glow orange at the edges. And that's what I'm doing, Maggie mumbled, choking on her words. Ross drew the knife away from the flame. Come on, mate, let's go, Todd urged. Ross held the knife at chest height, considering the blade for a moment. You're being very fucking rude about it, he teased, staring at the glistening metal. Put that down, please, Maggie asked. He jolted, and Maggie jumped back, but instead of aiming it at her, he placed the side of the hot metal onto his forearm, burning through his skin. The flesh melted, the scent of burning skin stomach-turningly similar to that of the bacon. "The difference between us," he said through gritted teeth, "is that I'm not afraid of pain. You can't torture me. You can't threaten me. You can try and kill me, but not before one of the others kills you first. So it's probably easier just to go along with the plan." He ripped the blade away, the flesh coming with it, leaving a red raw wound. "You'd better get plating up," he said, turning away. He put the knife down and returned to Todd. "Okay, show me the way." Chapter 9. Charles. With a final tug on the crowbar, the wooden plank snapped, splintering away from the frame. Charles discarded the pieces on the floor and rammed his shoulder against the front door, pushing it open. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Another level of decay. The scent of death wasn't something you got used to, not by a long shot. But this was different. "Alice," Charles called, trying not to be too loud. He shuffled through the space, taking in the environment. It looked different to when he had been there, not only because it was abandoned, but the layout had changed slightly. The curved wood-paneled reception desk had been moved to the far corner, with several ugly turquoise seats taking its place. Through the first set of doors, there was a main living area with more seats, a TV, and god-awful wallpaper. In the corner, a body was strewn across the floor, elderly face mashed and mangled. Charles took a breath and backtracked to reception. "Alice?" Just on cue, she burst through a door, releasing a plume of dust as she paced through. She was holding a couple of files and her phone. "What did you find?" Charles asked. "Look." She held out the files to Charles. He didn't know what he was looking at, but he did recognize the Lifelong logo from the cover. "This is them, right? Lifelong?" Alice nodded. "It all leads back to them, all of this, I'm sure." "Why would they have files stored out here?" Charles asked, checking over his shoulder for any infected. "That's what I need to work out," Alice said. "But it's a good lead." Charles smiled. "But first, let's find you some medicine," she urged. Opting for a more direct route through the building, Charles led Alice behind the reception desk and into a staff hallway. "A pharmacy used to come and drop off all the medication needed for the day. If we're lucky, there will be spare stock from the most recent one," Charles explained. "How do you know that?" "People like talking to me. I can't sit in a place and not talk to anyone, so I usually end up finding a lot out." Alice nodded. "You'd make a good journalist." Charles chuckled. "Nah. I love talking, but I can't write too well. Just the basics. Sometimes the basics are all you need." Charles agreed, pulling the handle of one of the many doors in the hallway. "Well, I guess." He didn't get a chance to finish that sentence. Inside, a care worker was cracked backwards in her seat, throat cut. Charles couldn't see any bite marks, but it didn't matter either way. She wouldn't be getting back up. "Jesus," Alice groaned. "Jesus indeed." "Here," Charles pointed out. "These'll do." He opened his messenger bag and swiped all the painkillers he could see from the cabinet opposite the dead woman. "Just painkillers?" Alice asked. "There's nothing else?" "Well, there's some strong ones here, a couple of opioids too." Alice laughed. "Don't go tripping out on me." Charles replaced the bag on his shoulder, the contents rattling. "This whole week has been a trip. Maybe taking one of these will take me out of it, wake me up from the nightmare." Charles closed the cabinet. "Well, if that works, save some for me," she joked. They filtered back out into the hallway whilst Charles swallowed a handful of pills. "I'm going to check a few rooms, see if I can find any more files," Alice said. Charles nodded. "Let's go." The first room they entered was a bust, so were the next few. They circled back to reception, looking in every gap and crevice to check for evidence, or a hidden infected. Back through the living area, there was a set of double doors at the far end. "Any idea what's behind it?" Alice questioned. Charles didn't know. Alice walked up and opened them, pushing both doors inwards. A massacre. An absolute bloodbath. Jesus Christ. They both froze for a moment before stalking into the room, their senses on high alert. At least 30 elderly residents were in the room, their bodies and limbs discarded in a rage of gore. Some of them had turned, by the looks of their eyes. The others were caught in the crossfire. "Wait," Alice said suddenly. "Here." She picked up a small box from a side table, strands of blood clinging onto it as she lifted. "Noxidone," she said. I think this might be what started everything. What do you mean? How? Charles asked, still scanning the area for any threats. Something Olive mentioned in a message, a sleeping pill Lifelong put out. A bad batch. Whilst he studied the room, Charles couldn't help feeling that bad batch was a serious understatement. You think they've turned from the pills then? Charles asked. Surely they've been tested, gone through trials? Alice laughed, dismissing the statement. Yeah, you'd think that. She put the box in her pocket, carefully traipsing around the area, picking up any half-empty blister packaging she could find. Be careful with those, Charles urged. Don't worry, I'm not going to put any in my mouth. Once they searched the entire room, top to bottom, Alice asked if they could check the office quickly before leaving. Everyone inside the building seemed to be dead, so there was no harm in looking for a little longer. That said, Charles had a horrible feeling about what they might find. They shuffled through another hallway, heading for the main staff office. The door was hanging from its top hinges, splintered inwards by force. Paperwork was strewn across a large brown desk, coffee-stained and crumpled. Alice started to comb through the sheets, looking for anything of use. Charles looked around too. It wasn't a big space, far from it, but it was absolutely packed. Files and shelves were stacked with a miscellany of junk, calculators, old training manuals, empty water bottles. It was far from organized. He pulled out the top drawer of a metal cabinet, flicking through old, yellow-stained files. They were in alphabetical order, surprisingly, and though he had no idea what he was looking for, he was quite happy to search through and try to be helpful. How anyone got work done here is beyond me, Alice sighed. True, the infected had probably run rampant and knocked a few things over, but most of this was just disorganization. After another few minutes, Charles noticed a red light blinking from somewhere within the shelves. He pulled away a bunch of old files and found a small, modern CCTV camera fitted to the wall. At odds with the vintage of the place, it seemed newly fitted, a few months old at most. Hey, look, Charles gestured, pointing at the camera. Alice kept flicking through files as she looked up, curiously approaching the shelves. It's recording, Alice noted. Charles agreed, but who was watching them? We better be quick, she added, picking up another handful of paperwork. Can you help me over here? Charles nodded, stepping over to the desk. He grabbed a bunch and started thumbing through. Are we looking for anything in particular? He asked. Not really. Anything with Lifelong on it. Charles set out his sheets on a small table in the corner, shoving all of its contents onto the floor. Alice chuckled at that. Not like we're making it any messier, he joked. His eyes were super blurry, but he could make out the text whilst wincing. A lot of care guidelines, staff reports, medical notes, nothing of interest. Alice exhaled hard, throwing another pile on the floor. Together, they worked for a good half an hour, intermittently stepping out to ensure none of the dead people had decided to get back up for another round. When it felt like all hope of finding something might be lost, Alice basically shrieked in excitement. Ooh, what? Charles asked, jumping from the sudden sound. Here, look! Alice handed a set of stapled pages to him. He set them down on the table again, brushing off his other sheets, and took a look at the front page. Interior memo, Carebrook Group. Email only, do not print. Charles sniggered. Someone didn't follow the instructions. He looked back at the page. Lifelong Corporation. Secure memo LL00455543-3. Carebrook Resident Opportunity. Dr. Sonia Sawyer. Hello, Stacy. Further to our discussion on the phone, please find enclosed a pack detailing the Serenity Clinic package. As mentioned, Lifelong will fund 20 places at the clinic as part of our Noxidone sleep trials. We believe that residents will jump at this opportunity. A 2-week stay at a luxury wellness clinic with all accommodation, food, refreshments, and entertainment included. We would look to administer 1 Noxidone pill a day, alongside a 1-hour session with one of our colleagues to do some tests. These are unobtrusive tests, compatible with all care/access requirements, and residents may opt out at any point in the process, should they find it's not for them. In addition, if these trials go well, we would look to support Carebrook with a complimentary supply of Noxidone, so that all residents have the opportunity to try it out. Please read on for some more information about Noxidone, our plans for the future, and the attached agreement. Our goal with this experiment is simple. Give elderly residents a chance to sleep less, live more, and make the very most of the time they have left. Yours, sincerely, Dr. Sonia Sawyer, Lifelong. Wow, Charles said, handing the pages back to her. Yep, Alice agreed. Dated a month ago. A month? Charles asked. So way before this all started happening. Alice nodded, which means they've been keeping it hidden all this time. Charles couldn't get his head around it. How was the care home linked? And why here? He was sure that Alice was thinking the same questions. Either way, they needed to get out before whoever was watching on the camera decided to pay them a visit. Chapter 10. Rowan. This is as far as we can go, Carlos explained. The car pulled over to the side of the road. They were at some kind of checkpoint, broken barriers blocking the way. From what we've heard, they have a sniper past this checkpoint. A sniper? Rowan asked. What is a medical business doing with a fucking gunman? Carlos laughed. Well, the real question is why aren't they shooting all the infected at their gates? Rowan agreed. It was strange. The three of them stepped out of the car, looking at the lifelong building in the distance. A single skyscraper cutting through the sky, surrounded by a bunch of smaller buildings. I don't reckon your girl would have gotten any further than this. Why was she heading here anyway? Jamil added. Rowan shook his head. He needed to think of something quickly. Her brother, he spat, almost unconsciously. He works in the building. She kept saying she wanted to come and get him. I said it was too dangerous. They both nodded, accepting the lie as if it was gospel. Fuck, man. Families, am I right? Carlos said. Rowan nodded, raising his eyebrows. Indeed. Jamil looked over his shoulder. A chorus of wild screams cut through the air. It was impossible to know which direction they were coming from, especially given the racket sounding off from the speakers around the city. As if reading his mind, Carlos cleared his throat. You got any ideas what these sounds are? He asked. Rowan shook his head simply. I heard them for the first time yesterday, I think. Trying to keep people awake, maybe? The rotating cacophony of birdsong, electric pulsing, and undulating tones was mind-numbingly irritating. But it had become background noise at this point. Well, it isn't fucking working, Jamil said. If you don't find her, come see us at the club, okay? Those weak-ass sounds aren't keeping anyone awake. Rowan nodded. I appreciate the lift. Thank you. Take this, too, Carlos said, handing Rowan a yellow device. It's a taser, but not full strength. If the tiredness creeps too much, use it on your thigh or stomach. Rowan took the device, nodding his head. Jamil handed him a small sack with some water and beef jerky to tide him over. Thank you again. We gotta stick together, us Wakers. Rowan nodded. He liked that name. They said their goodbyes, then the car raced off back the way it came, a length of bloodied rope still attached to the back. Rowan scoped the area out, looking for shelter. Before anything else, he needed to get off the road and find somewhere more covered. The area was trashed. Smashed glass, litter everywhere, blood and guts. At the opposite side of the road, there was a corner shop, shuttered but probably accessible. Rowan hadn't seen any infected for a few minutes, but if it was as crazy as his new friend mentioned at the gate, it was only a matter of time until some broke away and started searching the area. Rowan scouted the immediate vicinity around the shop. One of the windows at the side was broken, but nothing devastating. Using brute force, Rowan pulled up on the shutter, trying to budge it. It didn't move an inch. He scoured the area for something to wedge it open and found a discarded tire iron over by a burnt-out car. With a grunt, he slipped it under and heaved, eventually overpowering the mechanism. Something snapped with a metallic clang, allowing him to roll it up. Inside, several aisles housed a variety of goods. No brand names, but with a hunger as consuming as what he felt now, he'd eat anything. He grabbed a pack of ramen noodles, tearing the plastic. Taking the whole nest in one hand, he crunched down the thing in one or two painful bites. Once he'd eaten and drank some more water, he'd start searching for Alice. Rowan was about to chow down on some more ramen before a loud thud out back ripped his attention away from the aisles. Who's there? He boomed, dropping the packet. Moments later, a small middle-aged man walked out, knife outstretched in his hand. Get out of my shop, he said, eyes locked on Rowan. Playing along, Rowan put his hands above his shoulders. I'm not infected. Just looking for somewhere to stay. I don't care. Turn around and get out. Rowan took a step around the aisle, facing the man head-on. There's more than enough space for both of us, he said, slowly approaching. And by the looks of it, you're already in bad shape. Rowan tilted his head, gesturing at the bite on the man's wrist. And you? He spat back, looking at Rowan's blood-stained shirt. There's a nightclub, a mile or so from here. They're helping keep people awake, stopping them from turning into whatever those things are. I'm not turning into one of them, the man screamed, surging forwards. You need to leave. Rowan was bored now. He burst forward, surprising the man, putting him on the back foot. With a slick snatch, Rowan grabbed the knife from his hand. No, sorry, wait, the man shouted, just before Rowan carved a gash across his neck, unleashing a fountain of crimson. The man collapsed back, his skull smashing on the ground. Rowan smiled, victorious. He was about to continue looking around, but felt suddenly overwhelmed by a faint, nauseous feeling. He tried to grab one of the shelves, but missed, collapsing down to the floor in his side. The room was spinning. His head was in absolute agony. Tiredness was creeping in. His body was begging for rest. His eyes kept shutting for too long, his brain trying to force sleep on him. No. Rowan shuffled through his jean pockets and took out the mini taser Jamil had given him. Gritting his teeth, he pulled up his shirt and compressed the button. Here goes nothing. With the lightest of touches, a spark jolted through him, blowing the device out of his hand. He crumpled into the shelving unit beside him, writhing. The pain was intense, sharp. But he felt completely awake again. When his body stopped twitching, he leant back to a seated position. For no other reason than his curiosity, he stuck the taser into the dead man's leg. His corpse jolted, smacking back against the ground. It was pretty funny, actually. Rowan stood up, finding his feet. His head was ever so slightly clearer, but his body did feel as if it was buzzing. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and downed it, letting the ice-cold liquid soothe his aching throat. He needed a plan to find Alice. She had at least an hour's head start, and by all accounts, she was heading straight for this place. In his mind, that meant she couldn't be far. Above the till, there was an LCD screen displaying camera feeds from both inside and outside the shop. Studying them closely, he could see the rest of the building was empty. Good start. Outside, things were relatively quiet, but a couple of infected had appeared, stumbling around by a bus stop. Rowan decided to use the shop as a base for now, grabbing a basket full of everything he might need for his adventure. He found a backpack in the small staff area at the rear and stuffed it with snacks, water, plus the jerky and taser he'd been given. Then he slammed the shutter down, securing it as best he could. Here we go again. The first infected, a lanky girl in a tracksuit, burst across the road, sprinting at Rowan. Limbs flailing, grotesque face sputtering syllables and nonsense. She really was disgusting. Rowan raised his arm out straight, clotheslining the bitch. Her body slapped to the floor, but she was still raged up. With a quick snap of her teeth, she tried to bite his ankle, only missing by an inch or so. Oh, you fucking cunt! Rowan screamed, slamming his boot into her head. A few more thuds and she split like a melon, oozing out her insides. A short man was next, but his eyeballs were hanging out, so he really didn't know where the fuck he was. In delighted glee, Rowan took his time walking over to the man, who was stumbling in and out of the bus stop. Noticing his affliction, Rowan licked his lips. With a smile plastered across his face, Rowan grabbed both optic nerves and yanked back, popping them right out of his skull. The man screamed, wailing like a little girl before collapsing to the ground and trying to find his way back up. Simply, Rowan booted him onto his side and kept doing so every time he tried to get up. In his past life, before his job and the house and that dead bitch in his basement, he'd been in the forces. It was a life he'd left behind in search of happiness, fulfillment, and peace. God knew he'd done some horrific things that got him discharged in the end. But one of his favorite ever moments looked something like the scene in front of him right now. His team had captured a suspected terrorist and got round to some good old torture to get intel. The idiot didn't talk. He couldn't even speak English, so it was a useless activity in itself. But God did he scream. Rowan had plucked his eyes out one at a time, even made him eat them. In the end, they got no intel, but it had bonded the group together like nothing before. Anyway, that was then. Rowan left this guy flailing in the middle of the road. He was curious what would happen, and whether he'd still be there later in the evening. He secured his backpack and walked east, heading towards a large parking lot. The idea of Alice was consuming his brain, just like before. Her perfectly proportioned face, smooth hair, lean body. He couldn't wait to destroy every single part of her. Chapter 11. Sonia. Absolutely fucking not. That wasn't the timescale we agreed on. Sonia was facing off against Janice Thomas, the health secretary, who was being really fucking stupid. Her face was on screen, backdropped by a live map of the city detailing outbreak hotspots. I warned you that if this wasn't under control, we'd have to take action. Oswald and Lola flanked her at the desk, watching the screen with the same defeated expression. I asked for some time. I've been working on something. It just needs a couple of days. That's a couple of days we don't have. Look, I know you have some family stuff going on. Sonia pushed her chair out, its legs scraping gratingly across the floor, and stood up. Sonia, sit down, Oswald warned. Sonia put her hand up, brushing him off. Family stuff, Sonia said, her voice wavering. Don't you fucking dare bring my personal life into this. Not unless we're going to talk about expenses scandals too, Janice. There was an audible gasp from everyone in the room, including Janice. Who do you think, Janice started, before getting cut off again. If you bring the military into Egglemore right now, you'll tank the entire program. Not just this experiment, but everything we're working on. You have lost control of it, Janice shouted, her professional demeanor crumbling. I think you're in too deep. Wait, Oswald said, standing up. Sonia, sit down. Sonia was seething, but she did as she was told. Her emotions were leading the way, and that wasn't a good place to be. I'd like to request a 24-hour extension. Dr. Sawyer is working on something promising, and if it works, it will curtail the entire epidemic. And if it doesn't, Janice snapped back. Then you do as you will, Oswald said. We won't protest. Janice sighed, huffing. This was meant to be a great program, something equally beneficial to Lifelong and the UK government. Is there any chance of that on the horizon? Oswald was quiet, as was Sonia and Lola. I'm giving you 24 hours. That's it. Then the military are coming in, and let me warn you both now, if that city is unsustainable, we will eradicate it. You should start looking at transferring your work to another site. The screen went dead without any further conversation. Oswald looked round to Sonia. You better come through with something, or we're done for. Sonia gritted her teeth, nodding. Lola, I need another subject. Can you come to the gate with me? Lola agreed, grabbing her tablet. On the way to the elevator, there was an awkward silence. Lola had seemed pretty keen to talk before, so it was out of character. Once they were out front, she livened up a little bit. Everyone was tiptoeing around Sonia because of Olive's death, but it would be much easier if they all just played along, pretending that things were fine. They were on a tight, nearly impossible deadline to deliver something to Janice, and Sonia couldn't afford to lose focus. The tall iron gates were an imposing sight. This was one of the most secure facilities in the country, and though the capabilities of the infrastructure hadn't been tested in such a challenging way before, no one at the company was concerned about the crowds. Snarling faces pushed through the narrow gaps in the metal, all gnashing teeth in putrid decay. Sonia noted a considerable change in the physical features of the infected, a yellow tinge to their skin, pinprick rashes marring their faces. She didn't know exactly what caused the physical symptoms, but some kind of immune dysfunction was a likely culprit. She'd have to run some tests. Hey, Carl, can you set us up for one more? A security guard wearing a tight uniform looked out of a small security hut by the gate. It's my shift up top in a moment. I'll get Mario. He jumped up and jogged back to the building. That was weird, Sonia noted. Lola looked as if she'd seen a ghost. You okay? She nodded, her expression shifting for a moment while she tried to decide how to react. It's just those people. Being up close, it really does. Sonia, Carl said one more. Mario was here, a monster of a man, almost 7 feet tall, built like an athlete. Yes, please, Mario. He walked over to a large machine, twisting a key to start the engine. The towering machinery consisted of a tall, reinforced structure with a telescopic arm, able to reach over and grab the strangers outside. When the engine warmed up, Sonia and Lola watched as Mario carefully navigated the fence, tweaking the controls to ensure a successful descent. From the crowd, he plucked a random infected, a custom-built noose snaring their neck. When the arm raised back up, their subject dangled like a claw machine at the arcade, bringing back a prize. A woman in a sundress, ready for the beach. Mario carefully set the stranger down on the ground. Another security worker was ready with a pair of handcuffs and a plastic face shield, securing both to the woman. Thrashing with closed fists, she was a feisty one. The guards took an arm each, dragging her into the building. She lunged at them both, trying to bite through the face shield, teeth grating across reinforced plastic. Sonia followed behind. The infected were taken through a service tunnel on ground level, whilst her and Lola took the elevator. "What's your plan now?" Lola asked. "I've got an experiment that is 99% of the way there. Go and keep Oswald occupied, and be ready to meet me in the courtyard at 3 p.m. Lola nodded, making a note on her tablet. The doors opened and Sonia headed into the hallway. On the way through to her office, she saw Carl, the guard again, looking shifty as hell. In the corner of her eye, she saw him speed around the corner, completely changing direction. Following at a safe distance, she saw him look back before disappearing around another corner. He was on sniper duty for the rest of the day, ensuring no one living, for lack of a better word, made it to the gates. The company couldn't risk engaging in any high-risk conflict, and survivors could try anything to get to safety. It wasn't worth the risk, and given the fact Lifelong had a stockpile of weapons and a security division, it made sense to transfer some of the guys over. She'd go check on him later in the afternoon to see what his deal was. Back in the lab, the sundress woman was already secured to a chair, a nasty-looking red ring around her neck from the noose. Pure rage poured from her eyes, a knowledge of sorts. "You did this to me." She might not have plucked her from the crowd, but the fault did lay at her door. This whole infection, all of the dead. Olive. It was her doing. But she couldn't think like that. Instead, she headed into the adjacent control room, activating a preset audiovisual sequence. Locking the door tight, she engaged the security features and switched on the monitor. The woman was looking around the room, staring into the CCTV cameras. "Noxidone response 25, she said, recording her notes. "Activating sequence 432. Rapid binaural beats, switching tempo at random intervals. Undulating, distorted textures at maximum decibels, with concurrent high-pitched bursts." She cleared her throat, checking the monitor. "Releasing restraints now." Sonia pushed a button, causing the metal restraints to unlatch. The woman bolted up, growling as she got to her feet. Quite expectedly, she darted towards the control room door, slamming her weight on the surface. Subject gravitating towards the control room, turning on the speakers. She twisted a knob, raising the volume to the maximum level. The sounds she described started blaring from the speakers, immediately demobilizing the woman. She gripped her ears, howling at the sensory assault. Subject is reacting in the expected way, blocking her ears. Her vocalizations are becoming more extreme. Wet roars and suffocating grunts were intermittently peppered with something resembling real words. Layering the composition with a half-second delay, a few clicks on a keypad, the sound glitched, a frustrating inconsistency in the composition. The woman lunged at the door with her face, swatting against the metal. Sonia couldn't hear anything, given the soundproofing, but she watched the screen in delight. It was working. Subject has entered the final stage, exhibiting signs of overwhelm and frustration, looking for relief. In disgusting glory, the woman jammed a finger into each ear, pushing as hard as she could. Eventually, she was deep in her canals, blood gushing from the holes. The woman slammed into the door one more time before diving at the floor, as if it were an Olympic swimming pool. Her neck cracked on impact, gravity pulling the rest of her body into a contorted mash. "Subject has killed herself," she said simply. "Note for the record, a time of 1 minute and 38 seconds. Sonia switched off the music and screen, opening the door. At the intercom, she called for Lola. "Tell Oswald 2:30 instead. I've got something." Chapter 12. Todd. Maggie had shown Todd a great deal of the setup she had at the house. All manner of things, from traps to weapons to escape routes. He had a good expectation that she hadn't shared everything, given her nature, and that was probably for the best. Todd was halfway through showing Ross the fail-safes, disarming traps, when his heart started racing again. His panic attacks were getting more regular, and if he let them consume him again, the stress would probably flare up his fibro too. So he looked for 4 things he could see, 3 things he could hear, 2 things he could feel. "Todd? Stay with me." Ross was glaring at him as if he was expecting an answer to something. Todd continued as he was, hoping that he wouldn't notice. They were in the dining room, a small, unassuming space with only a table, 4 chairs, and a cabinet of plates. "There's only one trap in this room," Todd sighed, walking over to the wall. "I can't disarm this without activating it, apparently, so watch out." Todd flicked a button by the door. A unit disguised as a light switch. Moments later, a wall of telescopic spikes splintered through the cabinet door, extending a good 6 feet from the surface. Anyone unlucky enough to have been looking for a plate with that switch armed would have been stuck like a voodoo doll. Where does she even get the time to build these? Ross asked, bemused. Todd shrugged, shrinking away. You sure that's the only thing? Todd didn't dare move his head, but he caught the back wall in his peripheral, the hidden entrance Maggie had come through the night before. Did Ross not recall? Testing out his theory, Todd walked right on through, completely ignoring the area. Ross followed right behind. He didn't remember. That could be helpful. Right, Ross said. We'll do upstairs later. We're good for now. Okay, Todd said. What now? Are we good? Ross asked. You're acting kind of shifty, and it's making me uncomfortable. That's just me, mate, Todd replied. Ross nodded. Okay, well, go around to the fence and see if any more infected are stuck on the spikes. We'll need to clear them soon so they don't bring the whole thing down. Todd walked out to the front, looking for Maggie. They'd made breakfast and been sent back to the cabin. He didn't know what Ross was planning, but if he could keep things calm inside the house, it would give them a chance to think. At the gate, there were 3 new infected penetrated by the spikes. They were all dead, thank God. Any that were still breathing would be a pain to clear and an obvious hazard to move. Todd trudged over to the front gate and pushed himself over the mangled metal, careful not to slice himself. He circled the fence round to the dead and heaved them from the spikes, dragging their bodies into a pile 30 meters or so in the opposite direction. Their corpses were heavy and bloated, a deathly stench lingering. He dropped the last one and wiped his hands, wishing he had some hand sanitizer. A low rumbling reverberated from somewhere, a peculiar droning. It broke into fragments of sound, desperate and feral. Infected. Fuck, Todd said, sprinting back towards the gate. 1 or 2 of those things couldn't make a noise that prominent. This was a group, and they were heading right for them. Maggie! Ross! He screamed, leaping over the fence. He slammed his hand against the cabin, storming up towards the house. Ross! The boy opened the door, shaking his head. What the fuck is wrong? They're coming. Lots of them. Todd couldn't head to the basement right away. He hadn't figured out a way to show Ross the space without giving up the satellite or weapons. Instead, he grabbed one of the group's weapons, given they'd somehow amassed a selection of rifles and handguns in the common area. Do you know what you're doing with that? Ross asked. Todd nodded. Maggie had shown him the basics. The rest was just target practice. At least, he hoped that's how it would play out. It would have been nice if you asked first, Ross groaned. Go ahead, take it. Maggie was at the front door, already in action mode. You're not meant to be in here, Ross moaned, sounding like a petulant child. Deal with it, she spat, running to the kitchen cabinet. What are you doing? Ross said, interrogating her. She reached deep inside one of the shelves, shuffling around for a second. With a satisfying click, Maggie's face lightened up. She fished out a handgun, checking it was loaded. You didn't show me that, Todd, Ross warned. I didn't show, Todd, Maggie assured. We're not hiding anything from you. As I said, we only met a few days ago. We haven't had time for the grand tour. Ross scoffed, frowning. I don't care. Just don't enter without me saying so. Maggie rolled her eyes, backtracking to the door. We need to put this shit aside for a second and work together. No one wants those things in here. Something about Maggie's demeanor suggested she wasn't as afraid as Todd or the boys. Was she curious about how they'd react to the infected? Was she planning something? Not being able to talk to her was agonizing. He needed a plan and a set of instructions and god damn, maybe a joint or something. He didn't even smoke, he just saw it in some old French movies and it always seemed to do the trick for settling nerves. Todd, Maggie boomed. Head to the fence. See if you can't get a good shot now the bodies are cleared. Todd nodded, heading out right away. He didn't want to linger. If Ross saw him taking instructions from Maggie for too long, he might just lose his shit. Todd didn't enjoy walking on eggshells around someone almost 10 years younger than him, but he couldn't protest, not yet. Not until they had a concrete way out of this. The infected were already at their door, so to speak. Todd had taken a handgun and was really wishing he'd picked up a rifle instead. He secured the gun with cupped hands, just like Maggie showed him. Planting his feet on the floor, he took aim, lining up a chest shot. The closest infected was in gym gear, muscles bulging as he tried to scale the destroyed gate. Todd breathed in, steadying his mind and body. Then he exhaled, squeezing the trigger. The sound was deafening. The execution was hopeless. "Fuck," he grunted, frustrated. "Line him up again, Todd," Maggie screamed, approaching his right side. She lifted her handgun, firing off a couple of rounds into another stranger he hadn't even spotted, just behind the gym guy. They fell backwards, blood spurting from their neck. Todd took aim again, still and ready. Bang! Gym guy collapsed back, face exploding on impact. "Yes!" Maggie beamed, before a chorus of gunfire erupted from behind them. "Watch out!" Todd replied, pulling Maggie down to the left. Ross and his cronies cackled as they fired, absorbed in the moment like it was a video game. They were reckless and stupid, shooting with Todd and Maggie in the line of fire. None of the bullets were even hitting a target. Maggie got well out of the way, ready to take out another pair approaching the gate. At that moment, Todd considered turning his gun on Ross. Maggie would join him, no doubt. They'd probably hit 2 or 3 of them before they were gunned down by the rest. It wouldn't work. "Fuck!" Todd said it out loud, completely subconsciously. Then he joined Maggie, aiming at a pair of small infected people. They weren't just small. They were kids. This fucking life. "I'll take the right one," Todd called out to Maggie, nauseous at the things he was about to do. Somehow, taking the lead in this made it easier than being told what to do, especially with the look on Maggie's face, which had sunken to something somber. She looked at him, uncertain, before reality washed over her too. They didn't have a choice. The 2 kids could only be 11 or 12 at best, but they were every bit as deadly as the adults, just as capable and determined. Todd didn't bother holding his breath this time. On one level, maybe he wanted to miss, but he knew he couldn't afford to do that. Bang! The kid on the right fell to the ground, sliding through the shingle before coming to a bloody stop. Maggie fired too, prompted by Todd's actions. The other kid fell parallel to their friend, sibling, whatever their connection. Todd looked up. There was no one left. No strangers, at least. "Woohoo! That was a fucking rush!" Ross squealed. "Fuck yeah!" Then, "You two, shift the bodies." "We can leave them there like sandbags to trip over," Maggie said. "It's extra defense." Ross was mortified. "They are diseased, Maggie. They can infect us." "Not from just laying there, they can't," she snapped back. "You don't know that," he said, approaching with a cocky look on his face. "You're a computer businesswoman, remember? Not a scientist. I told you to fucking move them. I won't ask again." "You too, Todd. Don't fuck us around." Todd wanted to say something about their recklessness, how Ross and friends could have killed Maggie and Todd for no reason other than impatience. But it wasn't time. They both sighed, unwilling to put themselves at risk again. "And we still haven't had lunch, so hurry up," Ross teased, practically skipping away. Chapter 13. Charles. Charles and Alice left the care home right after discovering the files. They'd secured the doors as best they could, just in case they got caught short or needed some shelter for the night. "Do we head to the Serenity Clinic then?" Alice asked, climbing into the car. She placed her newfound shears in the back seat, hoping she wouldn't need to use them too much. "What do you think we're going to find?" Charles replied. Alice shrugged. "I didn't expect to find the files, so anything is a bonus at this point. I just need some concrete evidence before I start knocking at Lifelong's door." Charles adjusted himself in the seat. He'd quickly swallowed a few more pills, so was feeling ever so slightly more relaxed and at ease. The pain was all there still, of course, but dulled somewhat. "Do you still need to go to the facility, if we find more evidence?" Charles queried, starting the engine. "Those files are damning as it is. If we find a few more like that..." Alice brushed her hair from her face, looking closely at the files. "It's a good start," Alice said, "but I need the connective tissue. I need to know why, where, how. Olive said she had a ton of evidence on that hard drive. If it still exists on the Lifelong servers, then I need to get it." Charles nodded. "Maybe it's time we look at the note Olive left?" Alice nodded. "The one in your book?" Charles had already twisted in his seat, grabbing his bag. He rifled through, took out the book, and opened to the back page. In cute, almost childlike handwriting, Olive had left a few lines. Charles could feel tears forming in his eyes before he even started reading. "Charles, sorry to leave you hanging. If you're reading this, I didn't make it, and you didn't get the drive. Go with Alice to the service shed on the west perimeter of the Lifelong campus. Look for Printer 06 when you're within 500 meters. Wi-Fi, Printer 06. Password, LL775599XXC64-AQ974T. Just connect, and the file will download. The password will only work once. It's the only backup. XX. Fuck, Alice said. Charles wiped his eyes. Yeah, what do you think? Alice took a breath. I still think we should check out the Serenity Center first. A quick look. If it's overrun, we just leave and head to this place. Charles agreed. It would be worth checking out for sure. If it was as nice as the paperwork described it as being, there might be a chance of some good supplies. But he didn't want to linger too long. In his mind, he knew he was slipping. The pain, the vomiting, the blood. He had lived with this rot, so to speak, for a number of years. Doctors had warned him that if he kept putting off surgery, it would be the end. That time was approaching. It was cancer, probably. Charles had zoned out of most of the conversations with his doctor and asked to be given no more details when they announced it was terminal. They'd said words like mass and concerning, and that's all he needed to know. He got a little taste of how Olive must have felt in her last moments. A drive to help, to be of assistance, but an awareness of holding people back. Charles would use this as his final mission, his final bit of good, helping Alice and Olive expose this company, bring light to the massacre unfolding in Egglemore. With that, he had a surge of energy to get them back on the road and on their way. Serenity Center. Your key to a life of relaxation and contentment. The road sign was made from marble or granite with backlit words, protruding from the surface. Very upmarket, not at all like Carebrook. The Serenity Center was nestled in a small, unassuming corner of the city. They'd traveled for almost an hour, into the forest and back past Olive's cabin, noticing the scorched remains of the building on the way past. Beyond the expensive houses and small fine dining eateries, Serenity felt like another level of exclusive. I feel underdressed, Alice joked, as Charles pulled into the narrow lane leading up to the building. I'm always underdressed, he replied. I just have this one outfit. They shared a laugh before gasping at the sight ahead of them. The building was unlike anything Charles had seen before. An imposing structure built of natural stone and timber, sprawling across a network of interlinked bridges. Looking out onto a glorious meadow and picturesque forest views, the environment was the picture of calm. Charles stepped out of the car, immediately caught by the scent of wet grass and pine. The air was humid, filtering around him in a fine mist. Alice looked over towards the entrance, which boasted floor-to-ceiling windows and an ornate metal door with embossed panels. This isn't what I was expecting, Alice said, grabbing her shears from the car. Charles agreed, sliding his knife into his pocket. They walked up a wide stone path to the door, scoping out the immediate vicinity. It was quiet. Is it open? Charles asked. Alice pulled on the door, her fingers wrapping around the tall steel handle. It was locked, only budging an inch or so. Entry key cards, I think, Charles noted, gesturing towards a panel. It was the same kind of device he saw at the gym in Egglemore, where you went to use the shower facilities. Let's go round, Alice decided. They swerved around the sweeping tree-lined paths, trying each door they came across. The architecture was something to behold, endlessly breathtaking and rich. From a quick glance through some of the windows, Charles saw swimming pools, luxurious bedrooms, and state-of-the-art medical equipment delicately designed and laid out. I really don't want to break in, Alice groaned, but her voice suggested it wouldn't be out of the question. Charles chuckled. It would be a shame to ruin something as beautiful as this, he noted. Alice disagreed. Oh, don't get me wrong. If it's owned by Lifelong, I have no problem burning it to the ground. Point taken. I just need to take a look round first, she continued. Alice had charged her phone for a little while back at Carebrook whilst they were sifting through the documents. Now she had it out, taking pictures as they walked, circling the plot. How about this one? Charles suggested, breezing over to what looked like a fire exit. A small roll of bandage tape had wedged itself into the corner of the frame, propping open the door. Charles took the lead, pulling it open, bracing for whatever might jump out at them. He quickly scanned left and right, checking for any infected. The plush, minimalist interior was completely at odds with the carnage unfolding in the city. Neat, tidy, and spacious. They'd entered a large hall which looked like a high-end cafe. It had long oak tables and a circular serving station adorned with plates of delicious-looking meals and tasteful decoration. Bingo! Charles beamed, rushing towards the food. Charles, don't! He stopped in his tracks, turning to her in confusion. We don't know what they put in that food. Shit. She was right. Okay, let's look for some sealed stuff, he sighed, and only brand names at that. The hall had 4 exits, one in each direction. They went to the right, passing through an automatic door which slid open gently. A grand hallway cut through the next section of the building, branching off to various wellness suites and medical rooms. Where do you think? Charles asked. Alice shook her head. We need to find where they were keeping the residents from Carebrook. They paced farther down the corridor, glancing into each room as they walked. No one was around. Alice held her shears in both hands, ready to attack if she needed to. Charles held his knife tight by his side. Let's find an office or reception, try and find some kind of map or at least an idea of where to look. They continued looking around every corner, following logical paths, and with a bit of luck, they ended up at the reception. It was a double-height space with warm lighting and soft wooden textures, peppered with several water features. The desk was enclosed within a carved wooden panel, shuttered with varnished oak. Behind it, there was nothing but a PC and a tablet. Fucking minimalist bullshit, Alice muttered. They needed paperwork, names, something tangible. Alice tried typing a few passwords to bypass the lock screen, but it was no use. By the 4th entry, the system locked for an hour as a security protocol. Charles continued looking around the space, which was starting to feel strangely clinical and oppressive, despite its beautiful design. There has to be an office, Alice decided, storming towards another hallway. Charles followed in step, but froze when he saw the mark on the floor. A bloody footprint, faint but jarring against the beige stone. Hey, Charles called. Look at this. Alice backtracked, joining him at the footprint. They found another one just a few steps ahead. They followed the trail, looking for tiny specks of blood and smudged dirt to guide them. I don't like this, Charles protested. This is going to be shit. I already know it. Alice didn't disagree. They turned the corner into another hallway. Both froze in place. An infected woman wearing a white shirt and trousers kneeled in a pool of blood. It looked like a uniform. Perhaps she was the receptionist? The blood was trickling from underneath the locked double door, pooling at the center of the otherwise spotless floor. This woman seemed to be the only infected on the entire plot. Alice raised a finger to her mouth, holding the shears in her left hand. She paced slowly, studying the woman as she grabbed her phone with her other hand, recording her approach. Charles tensed up, suddenly overwhelmed by dizzying fear. Something wasn't right. He could feel it. Call it intuition, call it expecting the worst, but when he had a feeling like this, he usually ran the complete other way. Alice was trying to be sneaky, her steps near silent. Charles held his breath, concerned that a loud exhale might stir the woman from her afternoon snack. Before Alice had a chance to get too close, the double doors shuddered with violent force, rousing the woman. She snapped left, looking directly at Alice. With a sickly crack, the woman burst upwards, almost slipping in the blood. Alice held out the shears in front of her, pulling them wide open, timing it as best she could. She waited until the woman was close, then forced the tool into her throat, clamping the handles together at the last minute. The blades cut through meat effortlessly, severing the woman's throat. Blood gushed out in a brilliant waterfall. She fell forward, dead before she hit the floor. Charles's mouth was agape at the savage, visceral display in front of him. He took his time in walking over to Alice, joining her at her side. The door pounded again, splintering outwards. They were thick and wooden, probably reinforced with steel or similar. For now, they were holding tight. But for how long? This isn't good, Alice remarked, stating the obvious. We need to find the office and get out. Charles wasn't going to argue with that. They jogged down the hallway, keeping it slow and steady, trying not to expend all their energy. After a series of false starts, they eventually came into a small staff room, which had a bunch of cabinets and drawers to look through. Finally, Alice chirped, bounding to the first cabinet. Charles took the adjacent one, pulling it open to reveal an organized series of files. Let's get looking, Alice said, grabbing a handful of documents. The sound of people slamming against the doors down the hall was unnerving. Charles did his best to ignore it. Chapter 14. Rowan. He'd seen someone with her exact look, her exact shape. Choppy jet black hair, slim figure, perfectly proportioned and arresting. And what had he done? Jumped to conclusions, that's what. Barely able to contain his rage, Rowan had sprinted at the woman, slamming into her spine with his shoulder. She had landed face down, cracking her head on the pavement. Without any respite, he had pummeled the back of her with his feet and fists, standing and stomping and lunging with every bit of anger inside of him. By the time he was done, her head was mashed potato. Lumpy yet soft at the same time. As he rolled her over, excited to stare into her dead corpse face victoriously, he realized it wasn't Alice at all. It was just some woman, not even infected. In some ways, Rowan was glad. He wanted to torture Alice, really take his time with her. This was just a practice run, a reminder not to lose his shit too quickly. He wanted to savor it. Now there was a guy sprinting towards him shouting God knew what with pure rage in his eyes. He wasn't infected either. Just pissed off. Oops. The man hurtled into Rowan, sending him stumbling back into a fence. Rowan had underestimated this guy on his initial approach, but he wasn't worried. He fought back, grappling with him using every dirty trick in the books, poking his eyes, grabbing the skin of his throat. Eventually, the guy pushed back off Rowan. "You killed her!" Rowan rolled his eyes, leaning back to deliver a big final blow, but he stopped with his fist locked above his shoulder. The motherfucker just pulled a knife on him. "Look," Rowan said, raising his other hand into surrender. "I thought she was infected. I didn't know." The guy started bawling, screaming between moments of shock and anger. "I'm gonna kill you!" He pounced forward, slicing Rowan's face with the blade. Gritting his teeth, Rowan focused, knowing this could get very hairy if his mind slipped for even a second. Another slice right through his bicep, releasing an eruption of blood. Rowan waited until the guy raised his weapon for a third time, then lunged forwards, tackling him to the ground. They'd landed on a soft patch of grass. Annoyingly, it didn't have the impact he needed it to. Surging upwards, Rowan readied his fists and brought them down in a barrage of blows, knocking the life out of this bastard. "Hey!" Another voice, getting closer at an alarming rate. "Get off of him!" Shit. A brick wall of a man slammed into Rowan, knocking him off his current victim, who just lay writhing whilst his friend came to the rescue. Weak cunt. Rowan rolled onto his back, now on the road again. He brushed the asphalt, grabbing a handful of dust and debris, and threw it up at the man's face. It was a perfect shot. The muscly motherfucker gasped, clawing at his eyes. It bought Rowan some time, which he desperately needed. Kicking up, he dislocated the bastard's left knee, sending him spiraling to the floor. In a fuckload of pain, with his shoulder and just about every other muscle going, Rowan climbed to his feet and shuffled towards the two of them. They were both on the floor, one barely conscious, the other wailing and whinging. Rowan raised his boot high above the big bastard's head, ready to pop his skull. Growls. Shrieking. Screamers. Not just one or two. Rowan stopped, his foot hovering mid-air. Right ahead, just over the horizon, a thunderous horde materialized, backlit by the sun. A dozen bodies, a breathing organism, all directed right at Rowan. Fuck this. Rowan put his foot back on the ground and quickly rifled through the two men's pockets. Bingo. A handgun, Glock 17 by the looks of it. Its serial number had been shaved off, so it was probably gang-related. Very difficult to come by, but this would at least give him a fighting chance. The magazine was full, standard issue, 17 rounds. Rowan checked it over as he turned and ran, not wanting to get caught by the deranged crowd. They were gaining on him quickly, only 100 meters or so from the guys he'd left on the floor. Scanning the area for any threats, he beelined back towards the corner shop, practically slamming into the shutter when he got there, fumbling to get it open. He turned and shot at the frontrunner, some slender girl with a chunk taken out of her leg. How she managed to move so fast without injury was beyond Rowan, but the important thing was getting out of her sight. He dipped, pulling himself through the small gap he opened up, and ripped the mechanism back down. Not a moment too soon, as the sound of crashing bodies erupted against the metal. In the corner of the shop, right above the till, an LCD screen showed live CCTV feeds from various points inside the building, plus a couple of exterior ones. They didn't stop coming, piling against the door. There must have been 20 or so bodies writhing and pushing, weakening the structure. Rowan held the gun firm, raised at shoulder height, barrel trained on the entrance. His eyes flicked between the screen and the shutter, trying to keep his breath steady and calm. The windows were completely covered in branded vinyl, so none of the screamers could see inside, thankfully. There was no way he was getting out via the front entrance now, so he needed to try something else. If he could get to the back before the shutter gave up, he would be able to take the side road and get a good head start. The bellowing sound of weakened bolts and shifting brickwork added a certain urgency to his decision-making. "Fuck's sake," he growled, lowering the weapon. He turned and stormed through the middle aisle just as the entire front imploded, blowing a torrent of chalky dust through the tight space. Trying not to inhale it, he rushed to the end and grabbed the edges of one of the metal shelving units. The first screamers came into sight, bursting through in frenzied patterns. Rowan heaved, toppling the shelving unit into an adjacent rack. Without any effort at all, the motherfuckers just spilled right over them, barely inconvenienced. Rowan grunted, raising the gun. He pulled the trigger, popping a couple of rounds into a fat guy, sending him hurtling to the floor. His bloated body tripped a few of them over, causing a pileup. Rowan had the clearing. The timing was perfect. But he didn't account for the stray screamer to his left, who completely blindsided him. A businessman, with torn clothes barely hanging onto his blood-stained frame. Rowan tumbled to the ground, trapped between a shelving unit and a long line of refrigerators. The garbled screams of these things was enough to drive him insane. The businessman was right above him now, snarling with hungry lips. Rowan pointed the gun up at him, finger on the trigger, ready to blow his fucking brains out. A creaking sound howled from up above, followed by the entire rack collapsing on top of him. The metal shelving shattered the glass fridge doors, blowing shards down onto Rowan's face. The businessman collapsed down underneath it all, just inches away. Rowan was trapped on his back beneath the racks, pinned down with barely 6 inches of clearance. Pushing with his feet, he forced his body back, twisted metal pulling against his chest. The screamers piled on top of the structure, threatening to send the whole thing crushing down. He was oriented towards the front entrance again now, which was far from ideal. Those things were still finding their way in, joining the hunt, doing everything in their power to finish the job. Rowan was not going to die in a dirty little corner shop in the arse end of Egglemore. Not today. The businessman was crawling through the same narrow clearance between the floor and the rack, quickly gaining on Rowan. On closer inspection, his face was mashed and completely fucked up. His eyes twisted in their sockets, lacerations dug into his cheeks. Rowan contorted to drag the gun from his side, the movement aggravating his shoulder. Cursing under his breath, he tried to lift his head to take aim, but the space was too tight. Before he had a chance to try again, the man reached him, teeth snapping at his boots. Rowan tried to kick, but he fumbled. The man sank his teeth into Rowan's jeans, clamping down hard. The racking above started to bend, crushing beneath the weight of the screamers. Rowan was completely closed in, buried beneath metal and flesh. "So this is it then, huh?" His father's voice. "This is how you're going out." "Fuck off, Dad." Maybe it was time for Rowan to join his father in whatever afterlife was waiting. He could kick his ass and kill him all over again. Rowan's breathing was heavy, stale air suffocating him. He could taste blood and dried, sticky saliva. That fucking guy was still gnawing at his leg but hadn't broken the skin. With a deep breath, Rowan decided enough was enough. The creaky shelving above him started to splinter, on the verge of caving in. Rowan kicked out, grabbing the businessman's head between his boots. He didn't have the room to twist and snap his neck, so he just jerked and squeezed, doing his best to incapacitate the screamer. Eventually, something gave way and the man stopped moving. Looking out through the gaps between the tight-knit tapestry of bodies above, Rowan spotted a row of sprinklers dotted on the ceiling. It was a last-ditch idea, but he was all out of good ones. Bracing for the sound and kickback, Rowan aimed upwards, only able to lift the gun just above his head. Pressing his ear into his arm and facing away as best he could, he squeezed the trigger, ripping through the closest screamer. Her guts splayed across the metal, fluids leaking down onto Rowan's face. He squeezed his lips tight and winced, trying to protect his eyes from the putrid splatter. Rowan pulled the trigger again and again. Eventually, there was a clearing. He had a few bullets left, and if he was lucky, one of them would hit the target. Bang! The first one ripped into the ceiling. The infected cackled, as if mocking him. Deranged screams followed. Bang! Another miss. The sound of the gunfire split through his head, reverberating in his ears. Bang! A surge of water burst from the ceiling, pumping out from 3 or 4 separate units. The screamers lived up to their names, shrieking nonsense. Breaking away from the dog pile and into frenzied attempts at escaping the jets of water cascading from the ceiling. Broken and bruised, Rowan stayed exactly where he was, waiting for the horde to dissipate. Eventually, they all filtered out of the space, apparently turned off by water, of all things. A high-pitched ringing screeched in his ears, his head buzzing with sound. He wanted to pass out and scream and run all at the same time. Across his early years in the forces, he'd been in some sticky situations, but that had ranked as one of the worst. He took a few moments to catch his breath before pulling himself out from under the racking. Rowan would do anything to be back in at HGV, doing his boring rounds and going back to his cheating bitch of a wife. When all this chaos kicked off, he didn't realize how much he'd missed the blissful ignorance of daily life. This plan wasn't going to work. Waiting in plain sight for Alice to come along was making him too vulnerable. He would fare much better at the nightclub, get some people on side, maybe some more weapons and supplies. If they were all bitten, it also meant there would be less of a chance of being shot in the middle of the night, in fear of him turning. Everyone would be in the same boat. Rowan checked the magazine. He had 5 bullets left. "You've gone quiet," he taunted. Though he spoke out loud, his words were directed at his dad's voice, which had stayed suspiciously silent. When were people going to learn to stop underestimating Rowan? Chapter 15. Sonia. Lola had pulled through, securing an outside space for Sonia's demonstration. Once Oswald had seen her plans, she was confident they'd be able to get London back on side. He ambled through the courtyard and into the gated area. One of the guards secured the door behind him, locking them in. "What are we doing here?" Oswald asked. "Do you have something?" Sonia nodded. "It's not what we wanted, but it's something for the meantime." Sonia ushered them over to a small set of stairs, leading to a platform 10 or so feet above ground level. Once they were all there, she hit a button on the small control panel, which collapsed the stairs into a neat panel on the ground, ensuring they were out of reach. Sonia grabbed a radio, ordering the guards to let the infected into the space. "The reaction we're seeing is due to 2 things, right? We wanted to force users into N3 sleep, bypassing REM, thus creating more waking, productive hours." Oswald nodded. "Yes, that's the gist of it. Why?" Sonia put her hand up. "Hear me out. Lola doesn't know this, and I think it's important we're all on the same page. So something has gone wrong with the formula. The body is reacting to a compound in noxidone, creating an immune response, whilst the brain floods the body with all of its cognitive waste, forcing hallucinations and the fight-or-flight behaviors we're seeing." "Sonia, we really need to get to the point." "Basically," Sonia growled, impatient at Oswald's impatience, "these people are in a waking nightmare. Their body is breaking down and their brain thinks it's under attack and going all primal on us." "So what?" "It makes people want to bite people," Lola questioned. Sonia shrugged. "Kind of. The immune response attacks different parts of the body. Iron levels drop massively. These things only have their baser instincts, and they know, instinctively, that blood and meat will provide them with what they're missing." "Sonia, I'm sorry, but," Oswald started. Sonia raised her hand again. "That said, much of this reaction is a sensory response. I've been investigating different audiovisual stimuli and found that overwhelming them with sound and patterns forces a hard reset." "Meaning?" Oswald asked. "That they kill themselves, basically." "That's not what we promised the health secretary," Oswald growled. "We promised we'd get it under control. We have the speakers set up already. We could play these sounds and clear out the city in a matter of hours." "I wanted to deliver something positive to them, something closer to the original goals," Oswald moaned. "Well, this is what we've got," Sonia said plainly. "Stand back and watch." A loud buzzer rang out, releasing a dozen infected into the space. Just beneath the platform, the twisted bodies staggered into the sunlight, bolting towards the outer walls, displaying their fight-or-flight reactions. "They don't attack each other," Lola noted. "Why is that?" Sonia shook her head. "I don't know the answer to that yet. Theoretically, it could be that they recognize each other's reactions as normal, in that they are all hallucinating together. But that could be bullshit. One of the infected, a small skinny woman with a broken arm, stopped and turned to look at the three of them up on the platform. She started bawling, crying real tears, face warped. It was the most realistic emotional response Sonia had seen from one of the infected. She grabbed her radio quickly, alerting the guards. "I need that one taken back out. She's showing something promising." Moments later, a noose fired from somewhere beneath the platform, lassoing the woman around the neck. The rope tensed up, dragging her to the ground and back inside the building, her limbs flailing as she was hauled across the concrete. "Okay, now we're ready." Oswald looked over at Sonia impatiently. "We really need to get going." Sonia grabbed her phone from her pocket and entered a lock code. "This particular frequency and tone of sound is enough to cut right through the hallucinations. It's our fail-safe." Sonia tapped her screen, and the sound started blaring from a large speaker in the center of the space. Almost immediately, the infected cracked up, staring at the device. One woman darted towards it, clawing at the enclosure before starting to punch herself in the face. Eventually, she took to just slamming her head against the metal until her nose cracked, blood streaks manifesting in patchwork splatters. The others dispersed in a frenzied panic, sprinting into the walls, biting at their own flesh. Crumpled, broken bodies fell to the ground, a spattering of corpses finally at rest. A young guy, no more than 16 or 17, bolted towards the metal fence surrounding the speaker and linked his fingers into the metal. Using his feet to get purchase, he pushed off and started to climb the enclosure. "What the fuck?" Lola muttered. Snarling and twitching as he ascended, the boy somehow had the upper body strength and muscle memory to scale the enclosure at a frightfully rapid pace. The speaker was about 10 feet above ground, surrounded by a square of tall fencing. The boy was at the top now, hauling himself onto the small plinth. "Did you know they could climb?" Oswald asked, bewildered. Sonia didn't answer. The boy stood up, now in line with the large speaker unit. With desperate thrashes, he punched as hard as he could, locked in a battle with the inanimate object. "Can he break that?" Lola asked. "I don't think so," Sonia said, puzzled. "If they can climb and damage the units, what's the fucking point?" "Wait a minute," Sonia urged. "We need to test him. He's the only one reacting like this." A voice crackled through on the radio. "Permission to fire?" It was Carl, the guard who was acting strangely earlier. "No, don't fire," Sonia ordered. She needed to get this guy down and safe in the lab. There were too many variables. She needed to understand why some of them were acting differently, more human, so to speak. "We have guidelines for this," Carl muttered from the other end of the radio. Sonia looked up, scouring the gate for the man. On the day of the outbreak, Lifelong had quickly built a platform which ran the length of the front walls, where security would stand and scope out the situation outside. She held the radio right to her mouth. "I said don't shoot." The infected guy on the plinth broke through the first layer of the speaker, destroying the plexiglass it was enveloped in, the sound glitching into something off-key and wrong. It was a delicate balance, getting the sound exactly right. A blend of correct materials, height, volume, and tempo. By shattering one of the sides, that balance had been lost. The infected who was still moving below suddenly switched, returning to their violent, chaotic behaviors. "Shit," Sonia spat. "I'll get it right." "We don't have time for that," Oswald squealed, frustrated. He left without another word. With a simple push of a button, the stairs rose from the mechanism at ground level. Carl shot the rest of the infected at ground level, ensuring they wouldn't attack Oswald. Lola stayed by Sonia's side, awkwardly avoiding eye contact. They both watched as the boy on the plinth broke through to the electronics, rupturing the cabling. The sound cut out immediately. Out of nowhere, a thundercrack sound broke through the sky, and the boy's head exploded, blowing blood and gristle over the exposed speaker. "I said don't fucking fire!" Sonia screamed into the radio. She pulled back and launched the device towards the gate, knowing she'd missed Carl. She was too far away, but trying anyway. "What's his fucking problem today?" Sonia asked Lola. She shrugged, not saying a word, but something in her eyes suggested she knew more than she was letting on. "Get his body in the lab as soon as you can," Sonia asked. Lola gestured to the near-headless corpse slumped on the plinth. "Him?" she asked. Sonia nodded. "And make sure you bring the bullet too. Get one of the other guards to help. Not him." "What use is he now?" Lola questioned. "We'll see, won't we?" Sonia said, heading to the stairs. She wanted to catch Oswald, but he'd practically sprinted away from her. She couldn't blame him. It was another futile exercise, Another step towards London coming in and taking control. Chapter 16. Maggie. Maggie and Todd were dragging bodies. Again. Trying to find her footing, Maggie trampled on one of the dead's hands, snapping the fingers. "Shit, I'm sorry," Maggie grumbled. "I don't think he minds," Todd said, his face stoic but humor still intact. They hauled their respective corpses to the pile, breathless and out of steam. "Did he notice anything when he took him round?" Maggie asked, keeping her voice low. She was concerned Ross may have been too thorough, and they'd be all out of options to get the house back. Todd shook his head. "Not really. He noticed the cabinet, so I set it off. Those spikes were quite something." Maggie grinned. "Thank you." He didn't notice the back wall. Maggie slumped, discarding the body on the pile, ignoring her achy body. "What do you mean?" "The wall thing you came through last night." Maggie scoffed. "He was there when I walked through it. How didn't he realize?" Todd shrugged. "He was probably too busy rehearsing what he was going to say in his head," Todd remarked. Maggie wasn't sure how much of their conversation Todd had heard, and she rather selfishly hoped it wasn't much. She didn't want to appear cold or untrustworthy. The business with Ross's family had been a stain on an otherwise spotless career, and though she did have reservations and some guilt about how it all went down, she didn't think the fault lay entirely with her. "You two? Stop speaking and hurry up. I'm starving." Ross was screaming from the front door, his voice barely audible at this distance. Maggie looked over at the house, staring right through him. He was only 5'something, baby-faced and skinny. He looked out of place here. "It'll be 10 minutes, Todd called over. Ross sighed, louder this time. "Okay, but you're making me steak again." He shuffled back into the house, slamming the door. "We don't have any more fucking steak," she grumbled. Maggie rolled her eyes, grabbing another infected's ankle, and jumped back as the woman sprung to life, the hole in her chest apparently nothing more than a flesh wound. With no time to react, Todd slammed a knife right through her eye, tearing it back out alongside some lumpy juice. "Good catch," Maggie said, noting his swift reaction. He was getting more used to this, she thought. The first day they met, he was a stuttering mess. He was quickly acclimating to the outbreak. "If he doesn't remember the trapdoor, we need to use that somehow," Todd agreed. "I'll think of something." They worked quietly for another 10 minutes, then trudged back to the house, the sun soaking them in golden light. "What are you doing in here?" Maggie questioned, noticing Claire at the table. "You should be in the cabin." "I thought she could do with a little time with me," Ross teased. "It's not good for you to only hang out with your parents." "Like you would know," Maggie spat, not realizing what she said before it came out. "I'm sorry?" he said, stepping over to get right in close. "Say that again." Maggie smiled. "I'll get some food on." "Medium rare," Ross ordered, sniggering. "We're out of steak. It's spam for now." Ross made a retching noise. "I might be poor now, Maggie, but you don't have to offend me. Even I don't eat that shit." "Then you'll go hungry." She stepped around the boy, her heart beating fast. He was a little rat, but she couldn't afford to start another fight, as much as she might have liked to. Ross walked over to help, grabbing some potatoes from a shelving unit by the cupboards. "What the fuck are you doing?" Ross asked, bewildered at Todd helping in the kitchen. "It'll be faster if we do it together." No, I won't have that. Claire will do potatoes, you go, and take watch." Todd sighed. "There's nothing out there, mate. We just cleared them," Ross shrieked, grabbing a vase from the table and launching it at the wall. Todd dodged at the last minute, just missing the airborne china. The other guys filtered out from the living room to the kitchen. "Everything okay?" Justin, the lanky guy with the tattoos, asked. Todd gritted his teeth. His expression was matched by Maggie. "I'm no good at potatoes. Can I just hang out here?" Claire asked, looking at Ross, then Maggie. Ross turned back towards her, then leant in close. "I want to hang out with you too, but do this first." Maggie slammed the frying pan on the hob, making everyone jump. Ross got a kick out of winding her up, and she knew it. Claire sank into herself before sliding the chair out and joining Maggie in the kitchen. "You have a drone, right?" Ross asked Todd. "She mentioned it," he said, gesturing at Claire. "Fucking Claire," Maggie thought, immediately scolding herself for the thought. "I do," Todd said. "Want me to put it up and take a look?" Ross stared at him for a second, opening his eyes wide. all theatrical and shit. Well, yeah, he cackled, sharing a laugh with Justin, before heading into the living room. Call me when it's ready. Todd looked over at Maggie. She was waiting for him to look. Ever so subtly, she raised her eyebrows. Todd understood exactly what she was trying to say. Let's sort this out once and for all. Todd headed out to fly the drone, whilst Maggie seared sliced spam and acted like she didn't want to completely explode in anger. Claire grabbed the peeler, grazing it against the potatoes as if they were going to magically unwrap. You have to hold it right, Maggie said, grabbing the potato and peeler from her. Look. Maggie was flustered, demonstrating in short, impatient bursts. There. She shoved them back into Claire's hands and grabbed the pan, burning herself in the process. She'd accidentally knocked the handle over the flame, and now her palm was screaming in pain. Mum! Claire screamed, running over to her side. It's okay. Go back and carry on. Maggie rifled through the cupboards, looking for some aloe vera gel. That doesn't sound like cooking, Ross taunted from the other room. For just a second, Maggie was about to do it. Grab a knife from the block, storm into the room, and stab him right in the back of the neck. She looked over to Claire. She looked frightened and vulnerable, but Maggie couldn't see past her own emotions right now. She was gritting her teeth so tightly it wouldn't be a surprise if one snapped out. Can I help? Claire asked. Maggie shook her head and grabbed an oven glove, trying to rescue the charred sludge. Chapter 17. Todd. Todd pushed the toggle on the controller, guiding the drone over the fence and through the large fields to the east of the property. It was clear. Well, as clear as could be expected. There were bits of bodies and burnt-out cars, a stray infected running for their life. Todd rotated the aircraft, circling around to the south. In the distance, a horde had appeared right near a small barn. They were stumbling around, barely aware of their surroundings. They didn't pose any immediate threat, and for that reason, Todd wasn't going to report it back to Ross. He'd definitely tell Maggie, though. I meant what I said. You can't back out now. Talking in hushed tones, Todd could hear Ross around by the patio. He kept still, listening to the conversation whilst he let the drone coast around aimlessly. We've got them cooking and shit. Can't we just leave them to it? That was one of the other guys. Todd didn't know his name, but recognized his deep, booming voice. No, she's dangerous. She'll try and kill us all. Nah, man, I don't think... We have to do it first. Tonight, Ross ordered. I'll get Todd on side. Todd quickly got the drone back on path and made himself look busy. Ross stalked around, his eyes boring into Todd's head. He couldn't even see him, given the goggles, but he could feel his energy. Bring it back now, Ross said. There's obviously nothing there. Todd did as he said, recalling the drone. He slipped his goggles off, greeted by a weird, curious expression on the boy's face. Why do you like her so much? Ross asked, staring into Todd's soul. Who, Claire? No, fuck off, not Claire. Maggie. Todd felt a lump in his throat. She let me stay with her, so I owe her one. Ross scoffed. She ran you over? What the fuck? Is this some kind of, what do you call it? Syndrome? Stockholm Syndrome? Todd glared at Ross. No, it's a safe place to stay. With her? Did you even hear the things she said to me? Todd shrugged. I'm not getting involved, mate. He tried to sidestep around the boy, but Ross predicted his movements, blocking his way. I'm not your mate. The only reason you're not out in the cabin is because I feel bad for you. And why is that? Todd asked impatiently. Because you're one of us. An estate kid. We need to survive. Todd shook his head. Okay, well, let's do that. He tried to go again, and Ross blocked him in just the same way. You're not jealous, are you? He said, getting closer to Todd. Jealous? Of what? Me and Claire, mostly. You know I'm going to pop her cherry. We already discussed it. Todd felt his stomach gurgle, a sick feeling in his gullet. This kid was so lucky Maggie wasn't there to overhear him. I'm not interested in Claire, Todd said, trying to bring an end to the conversation. Oh, good. I thought maybe you were moody because we're close. You didn't seem happy when I turned up. Nope, Todd said. Nothing to do with me. Look, mate, Ross teased, a smirk growing on his face. There's gonna come a time where we don't need them anymore. I'll have a bit of Claire tonight, maybe. Then we're gonna get rid of them. Maybe push them out. Maybe just bash their brains in. Ross cackled, his laugh juddering through his whole body. Guy was a complete psycho. You can stay with us if you want, but you need to get in line. Stop whispering to her. It really fucking annoys me when she talks about me behind my back. We weren't talking about you at all, Todd fired back. And let me make this clear, Todd stepped forward, squaring up against Ross. You're not an estate kid at all. So no, I don't think we should stick together. What are you fucking talking about? Ross asked. I've lived on the estate my whole life with my nan. You moved in for a few years and can't stop moaning about not having a big house anymore. We're not alike. Todd barged past him this time, not letting him block his way for any longer. Don't walk away from me. You're lucky I even offered you a place in my group. Todd rolled his eyes, taking a shortcut round to the cabin. He was half expecting to be shot in the back of the head, but it seemed like Ross had other ideas. For now. Chapter 18. Rowan. Rowan slumped on a bench, completely spent. He was heading back into town to track down the nightclub. He squeezed a bottle of water down his throat and threw the empty container into the road. It was so tempting to lie down under the sun for a bit, close his eyes. It had been relentless since the cabin, attack after attack, and his body was fighting against his efforts to keep moving. The bench was opposite a small playground, which was completely deserted, of course. Ropes of blood stained the climbing frames and swings. Rowan thought he would have probably made a good dad. Not that he had a particular benchmark for such a thing. He just felt it in his bones. Not now, of course, but before he'd found out about his wife when things were all okay and he was just a simple HGV driver and husband. It was never on the cards, though. However strongly he'd expressed his want for kids, his wife had knocked him back every single time. By the time he was in his 40s, he'd given up even approaching the subject. A short howl burst from the playground. Moments later, a small kid, no older than 9 or 10, circled slowly from behind the climbing frame. She had a ponytail and cute pink matching pajamas. Even with bleary eyes, he could see the confusion on her face. Her neck cracked around, juddering in response to different stimuli. She hadn't noticed Rowan yet, but definitely had an inkling she wasn't alone. Rowan tried to shrink into himself, be invisible for a moment, so she could move on and get out of his sight. He didn't want to hurt her. The gun he'd retrieved was out of ammo, so he'd left it back at the shop. Hopefully Carlos and Jamil would have plenty of weapons stockpiled at the nightclub. The girl stalked around for a few minutes, then returned to the playground. Rowan managed to keep to the shade and hide himself for long enough to get to the next side road. Just off the high street, the nightclub was a considerable structure. 2 floors, black and featureless, aside from a simple, backlit sign. Zodiac. Vehicles had been jammed together to block off either side of the club from the street, leaving only the smallest of gaps for entry. A mix of trucks, cars, and even a forklift. Right now, several infected were trying to climb over the vehicles, getting shot in the head as soon as they surfaced. A handful of armed police officers were posted on the rooftop, equipped with shotguns and rifles, maybe even a couple of handguns, judging by the sound. A crack echoed through the sky, quickly followed by a squealing infected, their midsection blown out. It's likely they had a fuck ton of firepower behind those doors. Rowan would fare much better in there than out here. He needed a way to get their attention without being shot in the face. If what Carlos said was true, then everyone inside that building was bitten and trying their best to stay awake. That meant he just needed a chance to explain before they took aim. Another pop roared through the air. One of the screamers flew back into the alleyway, cheek hanging off of his face. He gurgled and writhed, dying. "I know Carlos!" Rowan screamed, stepping out of the narrow space. "Don't shoot!" Bang! Rowan felt a rush of air beside his temple. Something crunched behind him. He turned just as the screamer hit the floor. "Get over here!" One of the men on the rooftop screamed. Rowan lunged over towards the blockade of vehicles, searching for a gap big enough to squeeze through. There wasn't one, so he heaved up onto the shortest car and rolled over the roof, landing on his feet. The metal door rattled, opening from the other side. Carlos appeared, handgun aimed at Rowan. As soon as he realized who he was, he jogged over to meet him. "Come in quick." The sound of pulsating bass rumbled through the structure as he passed the threshold. A young girl locked the door behind them. "This way," Carlos said, leading Rowan to a set of double doors. As soon as he opened them, a wave of sound hit Rowan, nauseatingly loud and cacophonous. "Which way?" Rowan shouted, trying to compete with the racket. It had been a good number of years since he'd been in a club, and it was completely disorienting. Bright, strobing lights battling with pumping bass lines. Carlos ushered him towards the fire exit at the back of the space, which was lit up in neon green. Outside, the sound dissipated, and Rowan felt like he could finally catch his breath. A few people were hanging on the patio, getting some respite from the inside. "Sorry, it's a bit much the first time." Rowan nodded, his eyes acclimating back to sunlight. "Just a bit?" Carlos smiled. "No luck finding your girl, then?" Rowan shook his head. "You were right. There's mayhem up there." "Well, I'm glad you're here. To be honest, we could do with the numbers." Carlos walked over to a small metal staircase, climbing up to the rooftop. Rowan followed behind, checking his surroundings. The armed officers were still there, intermittently firing at targets. "We have a mix of people here. These three were at the hospital when it went crazy. Rodney, our resident science guy, you'll meet him later. He's got all sorts of theories. The others are just everyday people, like me and you." Rowan looked over the edge, watching the screamers continue to try and get over the barricades. "I'd have thought the army would be here by now," Rowan expressed. "It's completely out of control." Carlos nodded. "Rumor is they're on their way. They've been holding off for some reason. Rodney reckons Lifelong have the government in their pocket. That must have been what Alice was trying to find out. Fucking bitch." "So, what's the plan?" Rowan asked, looking back to the street. "We're taking turns to help each other sleep. Just 15 minutes, not long enough to turn. We tested it, and that's the max." "Did anyone sleep over that time?" Carlos looked down to the ground. "Yeah," he mumbled. "A few people." "And?" Carlos looked back up at Rowan. "Let's just say it doesn't get any easier. We're all in agreement that if the time comes, we want someone to take care of us quickly." Rowan admired his honesty, but there was another pressing matter. These people were just hanging around, waiting to die. He wasn't about to follow them on a gentle jaunt to the afterlife. "If these are our last days, I want to do something with them." "Yeah, survive until a cure is out," Carlos said. That's not what Rowan meant at all. "You got your revenge on that guy, right? And your wife? Why aren't more people using this time to right some wrongs?" Carlos stared at him in the eyes. He was listening. "You got something in mind?" Rowan smiled, glaring back at him. "I didn't tell you the whole truth. Do you know that girl I was looking for?" "Yeah," Carlos replied. "Well, we only met a couple of days back. She led me on, showed interest, definitely seemed as if she wanted to stick together." Carlos raised his eyebrows, waiting for the rest of the story. "She left me to get bitten. Didn't help, didn't even say goodbye, just ran off with this other guy." "Fuck, man," Carlos mumbled. "Fuck indeed. I don't like being pissed about. I'll help with whatever you want here. I'll take watch, do sleeping buddy rotors, whatever. I need your help with this." Carlos considered it for a moment. "Who's this, then?" another voice asked. Rowan looked back down the staircase at a guy in camouflage trousers and a grey vest. Early 60s, stern-looking face, pronounced brow. It took a second, but as soon as Rowan remembered who this man was, his gut dropped. "You look familiar, son. Have we met?" "Oh, yes, we've met. A very long time ago, at a very different period in my life." The man hopped up the stairs, grabbing Rowan's outstretched hand. "Rowan, I don't think we have." The man winced, trying to recall a face he most definitely knew. "Beckett. I'm sure it'll come back to me." He offered a smile, a knowing glance that filled Rowan with deep dread. "Found him out north, fought off a few infected. Impressive stuff," Carlos said. "And when did you get bitten?" Beckett questioned. "Not long ago. Let my guard down." The man nodded, his deep-set wrinkles softening. "Happens to the best of us." He turned, revealing a bite on his tricep. "You spend your life in combat zones and it happens when you're at home visiting family. The man upstairs is a twisted bugger," he joked, gesturing to the sky. "I agree." Rowan was cut off by shooting. It wasn't their men, though. "They're back!" one of the gunmen called out, returning fire. Rowan paced back, shrugging behind a small corner of the wall. Down below, he saw a moving truck smash into the vehicle blockade. A few people followed behind the van, keeping close to avoid being hit. Suddenly, a loudspeaker sparked up from on top of the van. "Everyone in Zodiac, listen up. We're here to help you transition peacefully in line with the universe's plan." "What the hell is this?" Rowan asked, shielding himself from the stray bullets. "Fucking Gregory's lot," Carlos said, failing to explain further. "Can you shoot?" Carlos pushed a rifle into Rowan's hands. Rowan nodded. It had been a while, but it was very much drilled into his brain. He rounded the corner, setting his sights on the van. Carlos gave Beckett a gun too, and he set up right by Rowan. They started firing together, intermittently moving back to take shelter. "If you want to learn the real meaning behind this infection, come with us," the loudspeaker blared. Rowan lifted his weapon, lining up the grey unit. With a squeeze of the trigger, it shattered into pieces with a fizzy pop. He shifted to face the van, looking for a new target. An old man sat in the middle front seat, looking clueless. It would be a shame not to take the easy target. Breathing in, Rowan settled on the stranger, the center of his face in his sights. He compressed the trigger. And completely missed, owing to Beckett slamming into his shoulder. "Don't shoot Gregory," he wailed, as if Rowan had broken the most important rule of a game he hadn't played. "What the fuck? Why not?" "He's immune," Carlos said. "Rodney told us to keep him alive. He might be the key to a cure." "How do you know that?" Rowan spat, circling his aim back at the people behind the truck. He fired a few rounds but only hit the metal. "We've heard things," Carlos shouted, still firing at the group. Rowan needed a better fucking reason than "we've heard things." Leaving these people to survive could mean another attack at a later date. The front door opened up down below, introducing a new barrage of shooting. Eventually, the group jumped back into the truck, reversing back the way they came. Rowan's lot continued firing until they were well out of the way. Rowan gave Carlos the gun back and ran down to the bar to get a drink. It probably wasn't a great idea, seeing how delirious he felt already, but he needed something to shift the pain. His ears were getting used to the sound now, though the bright lights would take some more time to adjust to. A couple dozen people were spotted across the interior, some on the dance floor, others eating sandwiches in the booths, like a friendly meetup. People were laughing and joking, enjoying their time together. Huge urns of coffee and hot water sat on a table at the side of the room, with a dwindling buffet spread. Several people seemed to be drinking something a bit stronger, but they were far and few between. It would be like any other day, had all of these people not also had chunks ripped out of them by rabid strangers, cursed with an illness they couldn't get rid of. Rowan yawned, wide and hard. A couple of other people followed suit, looking as tired as he felt. "Can I get a double vodka Coke, please?" he asked a young guy behind the bar. When he served it, Rowan chugged it down and asked for another. The boy looked uncertain, but went ahead anyway. Rowan took the drink back out to the patio, opting to stay on the ground level rather than the staircase. His head was fucking ringing. Alcohol might not have been the best choice. Carlos came to join him, coffee in hand. Jamil was there too. "Good to see ya," Jamil said, reaching out to shake Rowan's hand. "Thank you for your help up there," Carlos added. "No problem. What's their deal?" "According to one of the girls who joined us, Sarah, Gregory says this infection is a judgment from the universe, trying to restore balance. She was taken by him on the first day and managed to escape." "The fucking what now?" Rowan scoffed. "Exactly. He's taken loads of people up to the multi-story car park by the university, locking them away to turn." "What?" Jamil nodded, taking the reins of the conversation. "Apparently, anyone who's infected but hasn't slept, they're his target. He says you just need to work through the rage, and by the end of it, you'll be back to your highest self. It's a judgment, or whatever." "I fucking hate him already," Rowan joked. "Sarah only escaped because someone didn't lock the car they put her in," Carlos said. "We should introduce you to Rodney and Sarah, actually. They're good people," Jamil said. Rowan finished his drink and followed them both through to the dance floor. On his way inside, he noticed Beckett, staring at him with a completely different look to before. He'd worked it out, and he looked like he was ready to walk over and give Rowan a piece of his mind. Rowan blocked that out. He couldn't get into any other drama at the moment. He needed to play ball, go and meet everyone, and pretend he was interested in their ideas and theories, when all he really wanted was a few bodies to go and help him find Alice. Fuck everything else. Rowan wasn't angling for a cure. He wasn't thinking any further ahead than tomorrow. He knew he was going out, but it would be in a blaze of glory, taking down anyone who fucked him over, and if it came to it, he would gladly include Beckett in that list as well. Chapter 19. Sonia. Just as she'd asked, Lola had the body brought up to the lab, alongside a small plastic pouch with a bullet in it. She had tried to stay and chat, but Sonia had cut her short. It was nearly the end of the day, meaning most of the staff would be going back to their accommodation soon. Sonia studied the shell, holding it up to her face. Of course, she knew next to nothing when it came to guns or bullets, but she knew someone in the building who did. Sonia locked up the lab and filtered through to the elevators, heading for the 4th floor. Towards the end of the floor, Lifelong kept an armory and an evidence office. Her friend Jack worked across both, and she really hoped he was working and hadn't already left for the day. The main desk was covered in shatterproof plexiglass, with only one door in and out. Sonia shuffled up to it, peeking through to see who was working. To her delight, Jack walked through with a coffee, talking to someone behind him. "Sonia! To what do I owe the pleasure?" Sonia smiled. Before Jack was a happily married man, they'd had a few dates and encounters, and he was probably one of the only good guys left in the building. "Well, I was walking past and needed a pick-me-up," she joked, smiling properly for the first time all day. Jack returned the smile and set his coffee on the side. "As much as I'd love to believe that, I get the feeling there's another thing." Sonia nodded. "You heard about Olive?" His face turned from playful to somber in less than a second. "Yeah, I was really sorry to hear about that. I was going to come and check on you before leaving tonight." Sonia nodded, smiling graciously. "Thank you," she said. Then she grabbed the pouch from her pocket, revealing the shell. "Just between you and me, I need a favor." Jack switched back to his happy-go-lucky self, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, Sonia, you know I'm a married man now." Sonia cackled, not meaning for it to come out so loud. "And I've sworn off men forever, so that works just perfect for me." Sonia handed the pouch through a small gap in the glass. "Can you check if this is the same type of bullet that killed Olive?" He took a closer look, examining the contents. "Give me a moment." Jack went off to take a closer look, leaving Sonia at the desk, tapping her fingers. She looked around the space, realizing that none of it had changed in all of her years working here. Of course, there had been innovations and new floors and an ironclad commitment to keeping everything spotlessly clean during that time, but underneath it all, it was the same company she joined as an ambitious youngster. Things change, but they also stay exactly the same. "Okay, so, can I ask why you want to know, firstly?" "No, you may not," Sonia teased. Jack squinted at her, then accepted his fate. "Okay, well, tell me later." "It's the same round." "Exactly the same?" Sonia pressed. Jack nodded. "That's all I needed to know." "Thank you, Jack." She blew a fake kiss at him and said her goodbyes, then tracked back towards the lab. After the walk and the elevator journey back to her floor, she grabbed her radio from her belt and switched the knob to reach Lola. Before she could even say a word, the girl appeared right in front of her, idling by the door. "Hey, Sonia! Can I have a word?" "Sure, come in." Sonia swiped her pass and held the door open for her. "What's the matter?" she asked, sensing Lola needed to tell her something important. Did she know something about Olive's death? Or was this just more drama from Oswald? "London has made a final decision. They're proceeding with the army." Sonia groaned, feeling a large headache on its way to fuck up her day. "They said we had 24 hours, Sonia spat. Oswald fed back about the experiment. "I shouldn't be telling you, but I know you're trying hard to work it out. He's given them permission to come in." Sonia nodded slowly, her eyes floating off into space, a 1,000-yard stare. "Okay, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it. Is there anything I can help with before they get here?" she asked. Was she finally being helpful? For all her annoying traits, she had done everything Sonia asked the last couple of days, and didn't have an attitude about it. Perhaps they'd got off on the wrong foot. "You know Carl, the security guard?" Lola nodded, confused. "Can you ask him to hang back for 10 minutes after work? I need a word with him." Okay. I don't know if he'll listen to me, but I can try." "Say that Sonia asked. He won't argue." Lola agreed, smiling gently before she left the lab, closing the door behind her. There was no real point in doing any more tests if the military were coming in. They'd take control of the city and the infected, leaving her no test subjects to experiment on. Perhaps she could get a few transferred in before they arrived, but it was only a 2-hour trip to Egglemore. She'd have to think fast. The lab had a small additional room for holding. but it would be logistically difficult to hold more than 3 or 4 at a time, given their aggressive nature and propensity to run around like wild animals. Sonia needed to go down to the front anyway, so she talked to the guards down there. Outside, the air had a certain rotten stench to it, which she'd only just experienced. She cupped her hand over her mouth and nose and proceeded to the front gate. In the distance, she could hear the new instructions playing out over the speakers. Do not sleep. If you've come into contact with any infected, self-isolate immediately. It was her voice, thrown together in a hurry to get some messaging to the public. It had been one of London's requests, and they hadn't had anywhere near enough time to record something professionally. The sound had started transmitting on several speakers in the early hours, and it seemed like they had all caught up now. Sonia looked up at the wall, examining the personnel up there. She recognized Mario and one of the others, but Carl was nowhere to be found. Sighing, she grabbed the handrail and walked up the steps to the walkway. Hey, Sonia, Mario said. Need another one of them? He gestured to the thinning numbers outside the fence. Where did the others go? Sonia asked. Mario shrugged. Somewhere better to be, I guess, he joked. Sonia looked over, watching the strangers repeat the same movements over and over, clawing against the bloody fence as if they had any chance of getting through. Have you seen Carl? She asked, looking over her shoulder. He signed out about 10 minutes ago. Sonia cracked back towards him. Oh, I thought he finished normal time. Yeah, that new girl called through. Apparently they didn't need the numbers. Sonia felt a stabbing in her chest. Who, Lola? Mario nodded. Yep. Sonia made her way down the stairs, basically hopping down the steps. She charged back into the building, feet moving faster than she could keep up with. She scanned every hallway looking for Lola or Carl, but really just an explanation as to what the fuck was going on. Hey, have you seen Lola? She asked the girls on reception. They both shook their heads, shoes slapping against the floor. She rounded back to the elevators, pushing the button for the first floor. She would search every single level if she had to. Skin flushed and sweat starting to build under her armpits, Sonia stormed through the next corridor, poking her head into every open room. Everything okay, Sonia? Another worker asked. She nodded and smiled, maintaining her momentum. Everything would be A-okay if everyone stopped keeping things from her, lying to her face. She stopped suddenly, catching her breath. This plan was futile. There was far too much room to cover to be roaming around like a lost dog. Exhaling hard, she took the long trip back to her lab and headed straight for the refrigerator at the back. A vial of liquid noxidone sat by an empty syringe, a leftover amount from initial testing. She took the needle, sucked up a healthy dose of the clear liquid, and carefully placed it in a steel case, about the size of a glasses holder. Slipping it into her pocket, she shut off the equipment and lights and locked the door. Sonia, I've been looking for you. Come to my office. That was Oswald, walking towards her like he was ready to tell her off about something else. She waved him away, her patience wearing painfully thin. I'll come after this, she grunted, taking a left. She felt like a yo-yo going up and down the elevators every 5 minutes. But this will be the last time for today. The 6th floor housed changing rooms and showers for workers, usually the night crew but available to use all day. Sonia took a left, heading down the men's changing corridor. At the end, she flashed her pass to release a wooden door. Steam filled the air, humid and oppressive. The shower was still running, the pitter-patter of droplets echoing against the tiles. Rows of lockers lined the walls, metal combination locks hanging loosely from the doors. Sonia took a seat on one of the benches, staring at the only open locker in the room. Small photos plastered the inside of the space. Carl with some girl. Moments later, he walked through to the changing room wearing nothing but a towel. Jesus, Sonia, you're not meant to be here. Sorry to startle you, she said. This won't take a second. Can I get changed first? He asked impatiently, wrapping his towel tighter. Sure, I'll wait here. Carl sniggered. No offense, Sonia, but I've heard what you're like with the young guys here. Sonia scoffed. Don't worry, Carl. I'm not here to trap you. He rolled his eyes, grabbing his shirt and trousers from the locker. Then why are you here? Sonia didn't say anything for a moment. She wanted him to look back and see her face. He did just that, stiffening up when he made eye contact. I wanted to ask you about this. Sonia held up the pouch with the bullet in. She could see his brain whirring, trying to come up with an explanation. He looked vulnerable now. Was it fear she saw in his face? Yeah, you got Lola to take it from that guy I shot. You should have thanked me, really. That could have gotten messy. Sonia smiled. You know what I found out, Carl? Carl headed for the exit. No, actually, if you're accusing me of something, I should have a rep in here. Sonia stood up, blocking the way. Did you know this was the very same type of bullet that killed my daughter? His face sank. Bingo. Carl shrugged, idling in place for a moment before going back to his locker, pretending to get changed. He was stalling. Most rifles use those bullets. The guy probably had a similar weapon. See, that's where you're wrong, Sonia said. I did some more digging. My friend up at Evidence said that the bullets came from the same weapon. Carl didn't reply for a long time. He was staring at his locker, shuffling through some random items in there, avoiding eye contact. I'm sorry about your daughter, Sonia, but I know nothing about it, he grumbled, still facing the other way. Sonia reached into her coat pocket, grabbing the metal case. She unlatched it, carefully releasing the syringe. Slowly, she snuck up on him, until she was close enough to touch. You should have told me the truth. He jumped back, caught off guard by her proximity. Before he could properly react, Sonia stabbed the needle down into his neck, pushing the plunger. Fuck! He screamed, grabbing his neck. What did you do? I really hope you didn't exert yourself too hard at work today, Sonia teased. I wouldn't recommend going to sleep anytime soon. Carl screamed again, his voice breaking. No, you're fucking crazy. He pulled out everything from his locker, looking for something. Then he withdrew it, a penknife. How that had got past security was none of her business, but she wasn't about to let herself get stabbed. She gripped the syringe carefully, making sure not to prick herself. Can I get it out? Can I cut out some of the skin? Will it help me, Sonia? He was in a complete panic, tears filling his eyes, sweat dripping from his already moist skin. It was a shame, really, to waste a life like this. He was a beautiful specimen of a man, with his rippled muscles and model features. Sonia laughed, turning back to the door. He wailed in fear, collapsing down onto the bench, screaming. Sonia dropped the syringe on the floor, kicking it to the side with her shoe. She swiped her card to release the door and closed it behind her. Now that there was an infected person in the building, she'd have to initiate the lockdown protocol. No one in or out. That included not just Carl, but Lola and Oswald. It might also keep the health secretary and the army at bay for a few more hours. Sonia shattered the keycard reader with her elbow and grabbed her radio. We have a situation in men's changing. Initiate lockdown protocol 7, she said, as she replaced the radio and looked up ahead. She saw Lola standing there, wide-eyed and terrified. Sonia grinned, taking it all in. I know, Lola. I know what you all did. Chapter 20. Alice. There's so much shit in these cabinets, Alice sighed, shuffling through another deck of paperwork. So many words, so little time. You find anything yet? She asked Charles, scanning the documents in front of her. He shook his head. Lots and nothing. Brochures, reports, nothing of use. Alice chucked her pages on the floor, grabbing more from the drawers. It was a rather reckless way to look through things, but she didn't want to spend any longer than she needed to in the building. Smack! The door in the hall was at risk of imploding any minute. Alice didn't want to wait around long enough to see what might be behind it. Wait, Charles said. What about this? Alice put down her files and walked over, looking over his shoulder. He showed her a patient file, at least 20 pages long. Some girl called Jerry, Charles noted. He passed the pages over to Alice, who combed through them quickly. Shit, she said. This is the first test subject. Really? Charles asked, looking back over her shoulder. When is it dated? 3 months ago, Alice said, shocked. This has all been in motion since then. They shared a somber silence, which was rudely interrupted by more clanging out in the hall. Is it any good? Charles questioned, a hopeful lilt to his voice. Alice nodded. It's great. It's got information on the drug, test results, charts. It's huge. Charles smiled warmly. Best news all day. Alice smirked. Not so easy to come by recently, hey? Charles continued searching through more files. The only question is why here? Surely these files should be up at the headquarters. Why were they experimenting here as well? Smash! Alice thought they still had time. She was gravely mistaken. The door clunked against the ground outside, releasing a swarm of infected. The doors! Charles screamed, running towards them. Locking themselves inside this office was a horrible plan, but they didn't have any good options. Alice sprinted to join him, pushing her body weight up against the glass. Unlike the security doors holding the infected back, the office doors were made of smoky glass, which were lovely to look at, but impractical as hell. "This isn't going to work," Alice warned, just as the first infected started to materialize. 5 or 6 of them were out in the hall now, bumping up against the doors. Alice looked over to the cabinets, where she'd left her shears. "Shit!" she spat. "What do we do?" Charles looked around, desperately trying to think. "We need to reinforce it," he said. "On the count of 3. Charles twisted the lock, a futile attempt at buying them a few more seconds. 1, 2, 3. They pushed back, speeding over to the other side of the room, each grabbing the end of a heavy desk. Dragging it awkwardly, they tried to move as fast as possible, but it was too late. The entire door shattered, glass shards crashing against the floor. With nowhere left to go, they overturned the table, heaving it towards the door. The first infected, a woman in a white apron, dove over the table, lunging at Alice. Alice swung, cracking her in the jaw. It had been a long time since she'd punched anyone in the face and was quite impressed by the impact. Charles had his knife, which flashed past Alice's vision at light speed, skewering another stranger in the throat. "Cover me!" Alice shouted, backtracking to grab her shears. Charles tore the knife back out, releasing a fountain of blood. She grabbed the shears, then stopped to think for just a second. They were outnumbered, and getting close enough to use a blade, or garden tools for that matter, was too risky. Instead, she grabbed a printer, heaving it up off the table, trying to balance herself. "Charles, move!" With as much strength as she could muster, she twisted and launched the printer, taking out 2 topless elderly men. Charles stuck them in the back of their head to make sure they were dead. Another 3 burst through, tripping over the table and the bodies on the floor. Scanning the room for more things to use as weapons, her eyes fell on a fire extinguisher, sitting in a small cradle on the floor. With no time to lose, she grabbed the red canister and aimed the nozzle at the infected. "Please work," she mumbled, compressing the trigger. A plume of chalky dust erupted from the canister, coating the strangers in thick white. When it ran out, Charles surged forward again, stabbing repeatedly until they were all down. Alice dropped the fire extinguisher, readying herself for the next wave. But it didn't come. "Is that it?" Alice asked, looking at Charles. "Charles?" A few seconds went past. There were no more in the hall. Charles twisted to look at her, then collapsed in a heap, falling on the dead. "Charles?" He thrashed on the floor, fitting, his entire body shaking. "Fuck! Hold on!" Alice jumped to his side, putting her hand under his head. His eyes were rolling, bloody mucus coating his lips. She didn't know what to do. They didn't have any kind of first aid kit in the office. And she didn't exactly know how to use one anyway. Some bandages weren't going to do much for Charles's condition. Eventually, the thrashing stopped, and he started to come to. "Charles? Jesus Christ." He laid still for a moment before fading back to life. "Don't move too quickly. Do you need me to get something?" Charles cleared his throat before gently shaking his head. "Help me up," he asked weakly. Alice got to her feet, extending her hand. He pulled himself up, trying to support his own weight as much as possible. "I thought..." One of the fallen burst back to life, lifting his head. But Alice was ready this time. She lifted her foot and stomped him into the ground, carrying on until his head was in pieces. "Let's get out of here." With Charles's arm interlinked with hers, they carefully stepped over the bodies, making sure none of them were planning to jump scare her again. The hallway was quiet, covered in spurts of blood and various bodily fluids. The door was laid flat, having ripped the hinges out from the frame. Alice didn't want to look inside. She'd rather they just carried on back to the car and left it all in the rear view. But the glowing neon blue light escaping the room was too much to ignore, and when she craned her neck to look around the corner, her heart nearly stopped. Inside, a giant glass box, floor-to-ceiling glass with LED light strips up above, shiny and see-through, housed dozens of infected, all connected to random wires and medical equipment. "What the fuck now?" Charles sputtered, looking up from the floor. "This is insane." Alice couldn't vocalize her words just yet. She was too busy staring beyond the glass, sizing up the people inside. Any sensible person would have turned and ran, but this was too important to ignore. There were no tables or chairs inside the enclosure. Pools of blood reflected the strange blue hue of the lights, stagnant and sickly. "Can they see us?" Charles asked, approaching slowly. Alice was wondering that too. Every one of the infected she had seen had been wild and aggressive the moment they saw someone normal. These ones were completely calm, leaning against the glass, staring into space. It wasn't until Alice was only a few feet away that she noticed something different. All of these people had had their eyes removed, dark craters where their milky reflective pupils should have been. Alice gasped, not expecting the horror to affect her so viscerally. With the shears gripped tight in her hands, she pressed her face up against the glass, wanting to get a closer look. 3 of the infected closest to the glass were chowing down on discarded research notes, pens, anything they could get their hands on. Concerningly, one of them was eating through his own flesh, and, indeed, many of them showed similar injuries. "They're eating," Charles started. Alice nodded, finishing the sentence in her head. "They're eating anything." She leaned in closer to the enclosure, trying to see through the cloudy glass. A blaring alarm pulsed from above, a red emergency beacon cutting through the cool light. A small grid of lasers appeared in front of the glass, a tripwire of sorts. "Shit," Alice said. "That's my bad." They both backed up to the wall by the entrance as the infected started squealing and screeching, running into each other in blind panic. "That will hold, right?" Charles asked. One of them backed up as far as they could go and sprinted towards the glass, their face splatting up against it. A couple of teeth rattled out, tumbling to the floor. Then they did it again. Before long, they were all doing the same thing, taking a run-up and obliterating themselves against the glass. "Come on," Charles urged, grabbing Alice's hand. "1 second," she said, completely absorbed by their behavior. Alice grabbed her phone from her pocket and started recording, noting the 44% battery life in the corner. She only charged the bloody thing back at the care home, and here it was already halfway empty. "Come on, Alice," Charles begged. She filmed as the infected kept going through their devastating routine, backing up and lunging forward, dark blood squelching against the transparent wall. Then, a light flickering on above them. It was a small camera, just like the one they'd seen back at Carebrook. Someone was watching them. The very thought terrified her, but not as much as the sound that followed. The sound of pistons releasing. Then a simple click. Did they just... The entire glass wall started to disappear into the ground, some sort of hydraulic system lowering the divider. Just out of reach, the infected started jumping at the top, trying to grab the descending structure. "Go!" Alice screamed, pushing Charles through the opening. The door was on the floor in the hallway, so there was quite literally nothing separating the pair from the angry strangers back there. She sprinted as hard as she could, practically dragging Charles behind her. His feet were hitting the ground, but his balance was off like crazy, so it wasn't a surprise when she lost his hand, his body hurtling to the floor again. "Come on, we can't wait!" She tried to pull him up, but he was delirious again. "Fucking get up, Charles! Charles!" Alice slapped his face, bringing him back to reality with sharp force. Speechless, he stumbled to his feet and did his best to pick up pace. She hauled him through into another corridor. Alice could already hear the horde behind her. She didn't know how they were getting out of this one. Chapter 21. Maggie. "Todd, come here." Maggie ushered him over, grabbing him whilst the others were in the living room. She had told Claire to go back to the cabin and clean, to keep her mind off things. Maggie had been too impatient with her, though she really did keep fucking up, and she was sure Claire would already be feeling guilty enough. Todd snuck over, looking over his shoulder to ensure no one was watching them. "We'll do it in a couple of hours," he nodded. "But how do we get them here?" "Leave it with me," Maggie said, confidently. Todd was about to walk away, but he quickly turned back, looking over his shoulder again. "And what about Claire?" Maggie picked up a tea towel and dried her hands, having washed up all the dishes. "We'll all be in the cabin. She won't be able to..." Ross walked in, making Maggie jump. He hadn't seen them, yet. 9 p.m., she whispered, ushering him away. Then, to make things look a bit more natural, "And don't think I'll forget this either, you traitor." It was a risky move, but it seemed natural enough. Todd played along, rolling his eyes, walking away like an amateur actor. He even smiled at Ross on the way past, selling the bit a little more. "Everyone realizing what a bitch you are, Maggie?" he snorted, throwing his plate onto the side. "You missed one." Maggie grinned, taking the plate and popping it in the sink. She scrubbed it gently, calmly. "Let me know if there's any more to do," she said, completely deadpan. Ross looked unnerved, backing away and muttering something under his breath. Maggie left the plate in the rack. She headed towards the door, ready to join Claire in the cabin, but noticed Ross hanging outside of a door. The door to her basement office. "What's in here, Maggie?" She swallowed hard, a lump in her throat. "It's a coat closet. Feel free to look around." "It's locked." "Why have you locked your coats in their own room?" That was an unusual turn of phrase, but it was an unusual lie to tell. Not believable in the slightest. She was slightly concerned about her earlier performance with Todd now. I don't use it that often. The key'll be around somewhere. Just look if you want. Maggie rushed off to the door, slamming it behind her. She really hoped he didn't follow her. After a few seconds, it seemed she was out of the lurch. The sky was grey, smoky clouds threatening a downpour. Egglemore had been waiting on a big storm for weeks. It's all anyone had been talking about. Aside from a few hours of thundery showers on the day all this shit started, it had been mild. Maggie opened the cabin. Claire was stretched out on the bed, reading. K-pop Confidential, Secret Lives of the Idols. Claire hadn't noticed her come in, so Maggie took a moment to watch her. There was a certain peace to her demeanor which she hadn't seen recently. Long before the outbreak, the girl was a frantic ball of energy some of the time, then shy and withdrawn at others. But she was never calm. As soon as Claire noticed Maggie's presence, jumping slightly, her darkness returned. It broke Maggie's heart. Hey, what you reading? Same thing, still. Haven't had much of a chance recently. Maggie chuckled. I'm sorry for earlier. In fact, I'm sorry for a lot of earliers. Claire set her book down, watching Maggie's lips. I've been a total bitch. I've explained the reason a million times. I want to keep you safe, blah, blah, blah. I'm just really fucking scared. Claire frowned, her eyes darkening. She was always quick to feel her emotions. I'm trying to lead by example here, and it's going to pot, Maggie continued. But these boys are dangerous. Claire nodded. I made the wrong choice. I know that. But he's the only one who's ever shown any interest. Tears started filling her eyes. Maggie reached out her hand, resting it on Claire's lap. You don't realize until you get to my age. But the boys you date when you're young, hell, even when you're old, aren't always as magical as they seem in the moment. I made a lot of mistakes. And if I can help you from making the same ones, I will try my hardest. Like Dad, you mean? Maggie shook her head. No, your dad and I were great together, until we weren't. But we loved each other. There was never any real malice to what you did. It takes something like this to put it all in perspective. Claire reached in to hug Maggie, and she graciously accepted, pulling her in tight. You know, we're going to have to do something to get them out, right? Ross and that, I mean. There was an awkward silence for a moment. Yeah, I'll talk to him. I'm sure they'll go. It's all gone a bit far. Maggie admired her daughter's innocence in the face of it all, but it was also making her vulnerable. But if they don't leave? Maggie asked. They will. This is our house. I'll tell them. I hope they do. I really, really want them to. But Claire, they've put us all in harm's way. You, me, and Todd. They're reckless. Why do you keep talking about him like he's family? Claire snapped, shuffling back on the bed. Who, Todd? He's not family, but he's also not holding a gun to our heads. Neither's Ross. We ruined his family's lives. The least we can do is let him stay. Let him? Maggie roared, the peaceful conversation taking a hard turn. You think I'm letting him stay? Claire sat upright, her body tensing. He's got into your head. Twisted everything up, Maggie spat. Like I told him, his family's pissed their money down the drain on alcohol and God knows what. What should I have done? Set up a direct transfer every month, huh? Give them all of our money out of charity? I was running a business. Mum, Claire wailed, a scared yelp. No, Claire, I love you, but you need to understand what you've done here. I can't keep sugarcoating things because there will be a time when I'm not here and you'll need to do all this on your own. You invited a dangerous group of men into the house who could kill us at any moment for any reason. I mean, for fuck's sake, he had a knife to your throat just hours ago. Stop yelling at me, Claire screamed, standing up from the bed. I'm not fucking yelling, Maggie yelled, ripping the TV from the wall and launching it behind her. The impact knocked over a small bookshelf, which collapsed in a noisy bundle. Claire shrieked, then stopped in her tracks, her breath getting faster. Silence for just a moment. Okay, let's calm down. This isn't doing... Maggie stopped mid-sentence, noticing Claire's demeanor. Claire? I can't hear. I can't hear anything. Help me! Claire span, rubbing her hands over her ears. It's all gone. It's all gone. She wailed in an absolute fit of panic. I can't hear anything. Claire, calm down. Stop talking, Maggie said, running to her side. Claire let Maggie take her shoulders, lowering her onto the bed. Shh, shh, Maggie said, hugging Claire tight. Her shirt got wet from the tears and snot. Claire cried hard, her entire body juddering. Maggie wished she could whisk her away into another reality. Somewhere safe without other people or the infected or this miserable fucking existence. Then Ross turned up at the door, face like thunder, shotgun in hand. Maggie instinctively covered Claire with her body, standing up dead in front of her. The shotgun was trained through the glass and directly at Maggie's face. "You've been fucking lying again!" Ross squealed, his voice breaking into something angry and dark. "Get out here!" "Ross, Claire's hearing is playing up and—" Ross raised the gun and fired, a booming shot ringing out. Claire didn't even react. She couldn't hear it. "The next one's going in you," he threatened, yanking at the handle. "Get out of here." Maggie turned quickly, crouching to Claire's level so she could read her lips. She'd gotten pretty good at it recently. "Stay here. Do not come out for any reason." She made a flat-palmed gesture, just to make sure she understood, then pecked her on the cheek and paced to the door, unlocking it. The humid air rushed at her face like a stray wave, a dizzying, gently rotten tinge to it. Maybe it was the infected, but it could just as well have been Ross's breath, given how close he was to her. "A coat room?" he sniggered, his nose almost touching Maggie's. "There's no fucking coats in there. But what did I find, huh?" Maggie matched his energy, a twisted smile on her face. "Why don't you tell me? Come with me." Ross stuck the shotgun into Maggie's back and pushed her towards the house. He didn't say a single word the entire way, ripping the door open and shoving her through. The door to her basement was ripped from its hinges, a crowbar discarded on the floor just by it. Maggie walked down the stairs, weighing up her options if he really did try and shoot her. The computer screens were on still, the keyboard dragged towards the edge of the desk. "What have you been doing here?" Ross asked, his voice low and cold. Maggie looked up to the clock. She'd given Todd a time, and it was way too early. She had to stall. "I have a satellite link with a few friends. I haven't checked in since you got here." "I don't believe you," Ross said. "Show me." "There's really nothing to see," she said, avoiding his gaze. Then he leant in really close to her ear, his lips touching her hair. "Show me," he growled. Maggie sighed, shuffling over to the desk. She took a seat, loading up the satellite link. BBX Secure Relay Node V2.9, connected to SatNet, auth required. User _M4G-PHX_. Password, ***********. Authentication successful. Welcome back, Maggie. Last login 2 days ago. Unread messages 2. Fetch unread. Bitbyte T-3D. Guys, Maggie hasn't checked in. What do we do? N3R0 T-3D. Anyone know her address? Cypher Queen T-2D. There's no way into Egglemore. D4NNY T-1D. We have to do something. What does this all mean? He grumbled. Have you been talking to them? It says right here, I haven't logged in 2 days. Come on, Ross. She'd almost wormed her way out of it. Then he noticed the dialogue box in the corner of the screen. What is this? Fuck. Maggie had left up the new serial key she made for Todd just in case. Even worse, she hadn't even made it that unique. T0132DISB. I made Todd a serial key before you got here, she stressed, looking up to him for the first time in that room. It's nothing. So? Ross choked, his voice breaking again. You have a password. He has a password. You're out in the cabin, and he's in here. That's not what's happening. Show me his screen. I want to see his chat, Ross said, getting louder. He doesn't have a chat. He hasn't used it, she cried, losing her mind at the absurd situation. Ross jumped up, head to the skies, groaning hard. That's enough! That's enough! Ross, I'm not lying to you. It's dinner time soon. Go back to the cabin, then we'll decide how to proceed. That was ominous as hell, and something in Ross's eyes told Maggie he meant it. In a couple of hours, her true fate would manifest. Until then, she had to take it a minute at a time. Chapter 22. Sonia. Sonia had locked herself in the lab. After seeing Lola, who had scuffled away with a look of unadulterated fear on her face, Sonia simply strolled over and got back to work. If London was coming to shut them down, the least she could do was try and make something work. If she did, she might be spared from being fired on the spot. Over on her monitor, she had the remote speaker software on display. Sonia had complete control of the whole application, and had already started uploading the suicide sound, for lack of a better term, into the system. In a few hours, it would start broadcasting to the respective receivers, blaring out across the city. No one had tried to get into the lab yet. News usually traveled fast in the building, however, so it wouldn't be long until she was reprimanded. She was pretty sure she could spin something to get out of it, but given the friction between her and Oswald of late, it would have to be pretty believable. Hopefully, the lockdown would keep their focus for a little while longer. Sonia had a grid of live CCTV feeds just behind the speaker application, ready to see the effects in real time. Interestingly, she saw two people ambling around a building they really shouldn't have been in. The Serenity Center, a small facility on the outskirts of Egglemore. Lifelong had built it as a public-facing testing center to help build trust in the local community. Research showed that if you have a physical location in a public space, people wouldn't ask as many questions, regardless of what was going on in there. Plus, the only ones visiting Serenity were affluent enough to know to keep their nose out of things and just gossip privately to their rich friends. They weren't as likely to leak anything suspicious. The facility mixed a fancy spa with hidden research areas, allowing a flow of public in and out during the day, with the real work going on behind the scenes. It had proven difficult to get any real work done, however, when the care home started raising questions about the residents they'd referred there. Days turned to weeks, and before long, more of them were dying than staying alive. They had accelerated their experimentation in the months before the outbreak, and had to make up a gas leak to explain the residents' disappearances, along with a tidy sum of hush money, as was tradition. Sonia had abandoned the whole plan, just keeping an eye to see how they reacted when starved. A couple of times a day, she'd have a quick peek to analyze their behaviors, which had escalated in a rather interesting way. Not only were they showing signs of pica, eating anything and everything they had at their disposal, but many were showing stronger signs of rage, so much so that she had to have their eyes removed to make them a little more docile. All that said, she still didn't need any of it getting out, and the girl she saw in that room just looked like trouble. The man she was with looked more unwell than the infected, so it wouldn't be a problem for long. Sonia clicked through to the facility controls and set the enclosure to descend, freeing the trapped residents. They were already restless, jumping at the glass, trying to pull themselves over the structure. The pair of strangers backed off, running into the hallway. She couldn't be bothered to follow their trail, but there was something unusual happening just outside the front of the Serenity building. Switching to the exterior cameras, she could swear she saw a couple of horses. Visitor alert. The sound boomed out of an intercom by her ear. It was Oswald at the door, looking more relaxed than she had imagined he'd be. Maybe he was saving the attitude until he was face to face. Sonia hid the CCTV feeds and speaker controls, then walked over to the control panel, letting him in. "You heard the lockdown alarms, right? We need to get to ground level. I tried to get a helicopter, but they're all out." He didn't know? Yeah. What happened?" she asked, playing along. "It wasn't anything of mine." Oswald shook his head. "No, I don't think so. I'm just trying to account for our team. Lola's gone AWOL and my receptionist is off gallivanting around somewhere, and the health secretary is meant to be here in an hour. We need to get this under control." "What happened?" Sonia asked, brazenly. "One of the guards," Oswald sighed. "Shot himself in the head, out of the blue." Sonia's eyebrows raised by their own accord. No pretending needed. She didn't think Carl would have been strong enough to do that so quickly. Fair play. "Let's go then," Sonia suggested. Oswald was none the wiser to the speakers yet either, but maybe she could get away with that too. Chapter 23. Todd. The tension was palpable. Maggie was over in the kitchen cooking dinner. Claire was doing her best to peel potatoes again, but it really wasn't her forte. Ross and friends were in the living room as usual, chatting shit and smoking cigarettes. They'd run out of fresh produce, so Maggie was heating up tins of something, making it look a lot more appetizing than it should have been. Todd had approximately 5 minutes to work out a way to open up the secret back entrance without calling attention to himself. It was just past the kitchen, but Todd was at the kitchen table, in Ross's line of sight. "Ow, shit!" Claire mumbled. "You okay?" Maggie asked, looking over. Claire didn't hear her, of course. Maggie walked over, tapping her on the shoulder, and repeated the message. Are you okay? Yeah, just cut myself a bit. Shit. Stop saying shit, Maggie said, carefully grabbing her hand. Todd, can you take Claire to the cabin and get her a plaster? I don't have any here. Yes, but what about the door, Maggie? I've got everything covered here. Todd nodded, reading between the lines. Come on, let's get you patched up, Todd said, copying Maggie's technique of talking right in Claire's face. Claire groaned, rolling her eyes. I can hear a tiny bit, she said. No need to stand so close. Todd saw Maggie silently stroll over to the back wall and flick a switch down by the floor. He couldn't recall if the door swung inwards or outwards, but it stayed in position for now, completely invisible to the naked eye. Is it ready? Ross called through. 2 minutes, Maggie snapped. Todd ushered Claire down to the cabin. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. Shit, I don't know the code, Todd sighed, instinctively facing Claire to talk. Me neither, Claire said, holding her hand up as if it was going to fall off. Some blood was trickling down her fingers, but it wasn't a serious injury. Just a bloody well-timed one. Maggie followed, plodding down the shingle path. She had a bowl in each hand. Here, hold these, Todd, she said, before punching the code into the lock. You never taught me this code, Claire noted. It's never usually locked. Yeah, well, better we have one space to ourselves. Maggie was right. Todd smiled as she opened the door for them, letting them go ahead. I'll go and get mine. We'll eat in here tonight. Why? Claire questioned. Because to be honest, I can't deal with another minute of listening to those monkeys. Do you mind if I go inside? Claire asked. I'm getting cabin fever, literally, being out here. Maggie and Todd shared a glance. Don't fuck this up, Claire. If Maggie blew up at her again, Claire could go full tantrum mode and run in there anyway. Then the whole plan would be fucked. Luckily, she'd already made those calculations in her head. Let's eat dinner together and we'll go to the house afterwards. Maybe we can watch a film up in my room. Claire nodded. Yeah. We can't exactly watch one here, can we? It was a joke, but it made Maggie look sad. The TV lay smashed on the floor, nudged to the corner of the room. She had mentioned an argument with Claire, but Todd hadn't realized it was quite that bad. I'll turn the captions on, she joked, making sure that Claire could see what she was saying. They were being light-hearted about Claire's hearing loss, but Todd couldn't help but think it would put them at much more of a disadvantage. They all cramped around a small table, eating some kind of lentil thing. Todd hadn't had much experience with different cuisines. He either ate salads or takeaways. There was no in between. Maggie had made a dal, a curry of some sort, and it was fucking delicious. He wasn't even just saying that. You've got magic hands. I don't know how you made this all from tins. Maggie slurped a spoonful up. Spices. The saving grace of any boring meal. Todd agreed. When the world wasn't so shit, maybe he'd give a few recipes a go. I hope everything's all right inside, Claire said. I have a weird feeling. Maggie continued eating, wiping her mouth. Eventually, she put her spoon down. Let's see, shall we? She sat up, squeezing through the tight gap between the table and wall, and headed over to the bathroom. Effortlessly, she pushed in one of the wooden panels on the outside of the room, and it popped open like a cabinet. This is getting mad now, Todd joked. Is this whole place just a theme park or something? Maggie scoffed. I knew it would all come in handy. I didn't know when, but... You should have been here when it was all being installed, Claire muttered, her tone the vocal equivalent of an eye roll. Todd laughed at that. Inside the cabinet, or wherever it was, a monitor showed a live feed of the house. That's pretty nifty, Todd said. They watched as Ross and several others ate their food, causing a huge ruckus. 2 of them were play fighting, knocking over everything in the kitchen. Another 2 were throwing food at each other. They were like a pack of wild hyenas. Todd looked up at the clock. It wasn't 9 p.m. yet, but this was as good a chance as they were going to get. He kept looking over to Maggie for a sign. On her way back round to the table, she checked the door was locked. I can't wait for the internet to be back up, Claire expressed. No offense to either of you, but I need some friend time. Maggie grinned, slurping up more dal. Todd did the same. They finished their meal together, bellies full and energy somewhat replenished. Maggie looked over at the monitor, squinting to see something. Todd followed her gaze, noticing a very small timer on the side of the screen. Is this how she was doing it? Another few moments passed, and Claire got back to her book. Maggie sat dragging her spoon around the plate. She was nervous. Todd could see it. I'm going to have to get another book. I just can't seem to... Claire was cut off by a loud siren. The timer on the monitor flashed red, followed by a loud clash as metal shutters locked around the windows. Maggie and Todd looked over at the screen. Claire could sense their alarm and realized something was wrong right away. "Mum? What's happening?" Maggie exhaled hard. She ignored Claire's question, heading over to the monitor again. Todd peered over her shoulder. Ross and the others were still messing around until one of them noticed something was wrong. There was no audio on the live feed, but by the way Ross was walking around yelling, it was obvious he was screaming Maggie's name. Maggie tapped the screen, switching to a feed out the back of the house. And now we wait. "Mum, what's happening?" "Don't worry, we're safe." "What about Ross?" Maggie didn't answer, and Claire picked up on it right away. Like some kind of film, her jaw dropped, mouth hanging open. Then she looked round to Todd with the same face. "You knew? You did this on purpose?" Todd wasn't sure if she was asking him or Maggie, but the question hung in the air, unanswered, for a painfully long amount of time. Then Claire burst past them both, making a beeline for the door. She grabbed the handle and pulled as hard as she could, nearly slipping off it. "Let me out!" she screamed, turning to Maggie. She didn't look like a scared young girl anymore. She looked like a woman scorned, eyes full of rage, no control over her body. "Fucking let me go!" A deep growl echoed from outside, a chorus of screams. The horde was coming. Todd walked over to the monitor and saw a huge crowd only 100 meters or so from the building. 4 or 5 shots rang out, then it was mayhem. Todd switched the screen to the house, tapping it the same way Maggie had. "Let me out now! I don't want to be near you!" Claire wailed, starting to slam her fist on the door. "Claire, we didn't have any choice." Claire's back was turned, so she couldn't hear a word Maggie or Todd said. She was fighting desperately with the handle trying to escape. He wasn't sure how Maggie had set it to lock from the inside too, but it was clear that she had thought of every eventuality when planning her property. Every single one. Instead of arguing, Maggie walked over and grabbed a handgun from behind the fireplace. Then she grabbed another one. "Take one of these, Todd." Claire punched and kicked the door, backing off. "What about me? Huh? Or are you just protecting me again by not letting me have one?" "Claire, we'll talk about this." A blood-curdling scream echoed from inside the house. The horde rammed against the brick facade, tumbling through the trap door. Todd watched the screen as the group tried to fend them off, firing haphazardly. Claire pushed through, taking a position at the monitor. She started to weep, unsteady on her feet, not sure whether to stand still or pace around. "You're both killers. I know what he did was wrong, but you can't let him die." Bodies started to get ripped apart. Limbs detached, thrown across the kitchen with feral ferocity. Todd couldn't tell who was who anymore. They were just body parts. Claire walked to the corner of the room, silently. Maggie watched her, then turned back to face the screen. There was no one left standing, no one healthy at least. She brought up a small keyboard on the monitor and typed in some kind of string of numbers. Suddenly, 3 jets of smoke started streaming from the ceiling, blocking out the camera in a white mist. "What's that?" Todd whispered. "It'll take them all out," she said simply. Claire started chuckling in the corner, picking up on the words. "You're saying that you could have just gassed them all, instead of letting them rip them apart?" Maggie shook her head, not bothering to face Claire. "It wouldn't have worked. They would have noticed and ran out to get us." "Turn to me when you're talking," Claire ordered, "and let me the fuck out." Maggie snapped around, looking her daughter in the eyes. "I'm sorry, I can't do that. Not yet." She stopped speaking when Claire drew a small penknife from her pocket. "I have to have this with me to feel safe. In my own home. How fucked up is that?" Maggie swallowed, clearing her throat. "I know things are crazy at the moment, Claire. Not because of that, because of you. I don't feel safe in this house anymore. Let me out." Maggie turned to Todd. He shook his head, shrugging. "I just want you to be safe," Maggie said, her voice lilting. Todd hadn't seen her on the verge of tears before. It was disquieting. "Unlock the door," Claire warned. She wasn't holding the knife out, but the very appearance of it had done the trick. "Can we talk?" Maggie asked, but Claire paced straight to the door. Reluctantly, Maggie followed, tapping a code to unlock it. Before she could say another word, Claire was out of the cabin, sprinting up the path. "Should we follow her? Is it safe?" Todd asked. Maggie didn't answer. Her face was blank, shell-shocked. "The gas will have dissipated now," she said. "If it hasn't, she'll just come right back out coughing." "Give her 5 minutes. It'll all work out," Todd assured. It was a complete and utter lie. God knows how he'd have handled a similar situation if he was Maggie. But it was the right thing to say in the moment. Chapter 24. Alice. Fuck! Alice screamed, sprinting as fast as she could down the corridor. A jagged piece of metal tore through her bicep as she rounded the corner, splattering blood out onto the floor. Some kind of broken cabinet. She turned to see how close the infected were and almost broke her neck looking back round so fast. They were right behind, stumbling and hurtling into walls. No sight to give them any direction, but they could smell the blood. She was almost certain of it. As she craned back one more time, she saw them dive to the floor like it was an Olympic swimming pool, trying to lick up the small trickle of blood that fell from her wound. Watching them in their revolting glee, it gave her an idea. Come on, she reminded Charles, dragging him behind her. Alice brushed up against the wall to her right, leaving crimson streaks across signboards and sandstone-colored walls. Moments later, she heard a few of them collide with the wall, fighting over the same few drops. There! Charles called out, doing his best to point. They were close to reception, very nearly at the entrance. Charles saw a push button at the end of the hall, which he quickly slapped on the way past. The glass doors slowly closed inwards, softly locking shut behind her. It wouldn't hold back the infected for long, but it would slow them down. It was getting dark now, muddy blue skies clear but dramatic. Alice and Charles passed the threshold to the outside, welcomed back by a candle-worthy scent of pine and wildflowers. The car was only down the end of the path, but as usual, in true Egglemore fashion, another roadblock appeared as soon as the last one was in the rear view. What do we have here, then? Two men on horseback. They spoke with an almost stereotypical posh twang, though it seemed almost forced. Several dogs were running around, weaving between the horses. There's a group of them right behind us, Alice warned. We don't want any trouble. Well, that's no fun, another of the boys teased. He had a rifle or a shotgun. Alice couldn't quite make it out. We're out here to hunt. We need to go, Charles urged. We have a vehicle if you need to come with us. The third boy laughed. He was the ugliest of them all, but also the biggest built. I don't think we will, he said, snorting. What do you have, like a 3-door? Smash. The doors. Charles grabbed Alice, dragging her off to the side. Hey, we're not finished with you. Murmurs hung in the air for a moment, followed by the first burst of gunfire. Alice braced herself, half expecting a bullet to rip through her head. But it wasn't aimed at her. There were so many more infected than she thought. The entire crowd spread across the patio outside the entrance, sprinting full speed towards whatever they could hear. Get down, Alice said, pushing Charles to the floor. There was a large planter just a few feet away, which they both crawled over to, taking shelter. Yelps and screams filled the air. One of the infected, an older man, went straight for one of the dogs. At odds with his age, he ripped the animal from the ground, squealing. Then, he clenched his jaw into the top of the dog's neck and ripped out a hairy chunk of meat. The animal squealed, dropping to the floor and bleeding out onto the pavement. Another one was trying to bite a horse, but that didn't go so well. It kicked back, booting the stranger in the face, breaking his neck. What do we do? Charles asked. Alice stared out at the chaos, not knowing the answer to that herself. A sickly screech burst from one of the horses as it got caught in the crossfire, bucking to throw the boy from its back. He slapped against the ground, with the horse landing right on his legs, crushing him. The boy's screams grew more intense as the infected started to rip open the horse's stomach, leaving him pinned underneath, unable to do anything but watch and wait his turn. The boy tried pulling himself out, tried fighting them off, but he was dead meat. Finally, a middle-aged woman in paper surgery scrubs leaned over, bearing all, and chewed open the boy's throat, taking her time with it. It was complete carnage, and though all of these people were blind and eyeless, they had done a pretty great job with their other senses. Help! Shit. A beefy guy, with arms as thick as Alice's waist, was stalking around by the planter, babbling to himself. Help me. Stop. As the last of the horses fell from view, overcome by wounds, a strange clicking sound started playing in the distance. She'd heard the speakers intermittently throughout the day, a raucous clash of nature and glitchy electronic textures. But this was different. Louder in volume by orders of magnitude, it gave her a nauseous feeling, a stirring in the gut. The beefy guy in front of her had a much stronger reaction, however. As soon as he heard the sound, he hauled himself to the floor, landing awkwardly on his knees. Without missing a beat, he lurched up and slammed his head into the pavement, breaking his nose. The second slam cost him his teeth. The third knocked him unconscious. Charles rose up, noticing the change in energy. What's going on? Two infected men stopped munching on horse intestines and grabbed their ears, trying to block out the sound. Alice watched as one of them took a running jump into the water surrounding the building. The other one stuck his head so deep into the horse's open stomach cavity that he suffocated, smothered by slick guts. Alice watched as they all changed, suddenly overwhelmed by the sound. Her and Charles had no kind of reaction at all. Could it be an experiment? "Let's go, now," Alice urged, grabbing Charles's hand. They weaved through the dead bodies and puddles of blood, completely ignored by the infected. Right by the footpath, one of the boys was still alive, but unable to move. "Help me," he mouthed, his voice below a whisper. Alice couldn't think of anything she wanted to do less. She didn't even slow her pace, just breezing past him in his mangled body. Finally, they arrived at the car. Alice pulled open the passenger door and stuffed Charles inside, nearly trapping his ankle by closing the door too fast. She circled round to her seat and quickly buckled in. "You can't drive," Charles said. Alice shook her head. "Like I said, I can, I just don't like to. Because that's how you lose your closest family in a blaze of burning skin and twisted metal. That's how you end up calling your brother for 12 hours straight to see where he is and why it's taking him so long to travel to you on Christmas Eve." She still remembered the pictures of his body. "It's manual too, which sucks," Charles said, gesturing to the gear stick. "It's fine. Let's just get out of here." Alice started the engine and awkwardly shifted into first gear. By the time they were on the way down the hill and back towards the city centre, she'd become much smoother with it. They were completely at a loss of where to go. Charles was starting to slip, his eyes flickering as he tried to stay awake. He was breathing, but it was laboured. Alice swerved around a corner, just missing a small bollard on the pavement. Trying to course correct, she angled to get back on the road, but one of the front tyres popped, a loud bang followed by a torturous hiss. "Shit!" Alice screamed, hitting the brake. The car stalled. There was complete silence aside from the puncture. "Do you know how to change a tyre?" she asked Charles. He didn't answer. "Charles?" He wasn't moving again, asleep, or worse. Alice quickly placed her hand on his neck. He had a pulse, but it was weak. Alice quickly unbuckled her belt and reached over, grabbing some water. "Drink this," she ordered, shaking him. He didn't respond. As she turned to look out the windscreen again, she saw a huge truck heading towards them, completely out of control. Wincing, she couldn't see anyone in the driver's seat. "Charles, we need to go! Charles!" It grew closer in distance, swerving all around the road, but it maintained its direction. If she didn't get out right now, she would be crushed. She took a final look at Charles, a tear falling from her eye. Chapter 25. Rowan. "This is Sarah, who we mentioned. She escaped Gregory's weird group," Carlos said, back out on the patio with another coffee. Rowan held out his hand to greet her. She had a plain face and fine clothing. He had no interest in her on an attraction level, so he'd probably forget her name. "Nice to meet you," Rowan said. "You too," she answered. "American? What brings you to Egglemore?" Rowan asked, her accent catching him by surprise. "Believe it or not, I was visiting family." "I got my timing wrong." Rowan agreed. "You can say that again." "Right. Now, let's find Rodney. Has anyone seen him?" Sarah shook her head. Before Carlos could say another word, Jamil appeared at the door, face flushed with panic. "Carlos!" Carlos snapped around to look at him, his face furrowed in concern. "What is it? Rodney!" They all ran back inside, breathlessly searching for the man. A gunshot boomed across the dance floor, met with surprised screams and squatting bodies. "I don't want to be one of them!" Rodney was a rat-like short man in his 60s at a guess. He had a gun trained at the ceiling, stumbling through the crowd, popping off shots like it was a new craze. "Rodney, stop!" Rodney lowered his weapon and fired again, shooting a stranger in the shoulder. Rowan backed up against a column, flanked by the other two men. Sarah panicked momentarily. A bullet flew through her cheek, launching her to the ground. Rowan could see her bloody gums and chipped teeth through the hole it left. "Sarah!" Carlos wailed, diving to protect her. Without a second thought, Rowan grabbed Carlos's gun from his belt holster and aimed at Rodney, blowing his face apart. The bassline continued to thud. People were frozen in small groups they were dancing in. Carlos looked up, and for a moment, Rowan thought he may have made a big mistake. What if that scientist had been the key to creating some kind of cure for all the people here? Had he just destroyed him? "Thanks, men," Carlos said, helping Sarah sit up. She was crying in agony, but it wasn't a life-threatening injury. "Jamil, go get Beckett. He's got some first aid training." The men's voices were breaking from having to shout so loud over the music. Rowan headed to the back door, ready to get some fresh air again. Carlos followed behind. "Jamil's helping her out. Look. Thank you for what you did there." Rowan waved it off. "It's nothing. He was crazy." Carlos nodded. "He was crazy and brilliant. We had a feeling something like this might happen, but we didn't think it would be so soon. He's acted like that before, Rowan asked. No, not at all, but others have. A couple of days without sleep makes the whole world feel different. Rowan agreed. He couldn't help thinking that his days were seriously numbered. He was permanently drowsy and skittish, and though he'd expected to last 3 or 4 more days at a push, the tiredness he felt was like nothing he'd ever felt before. But Alice... We want you to stay, Carlos said, if you want to. Rowan smiled. Yeah, I didn't do too well out there. Neither did we. We need someone around who can do the shit that needs to get done, if that makes sense. Shooting people in the face, Rowan offered, half joking. Carlos didn't answer right away, but he did grin. Well, we're quite tight-knit here, even though it's only been, 3 days? Rowan nodded. We faltered a couple of times. We need someone who can pull the trigger without hesitation, regardless of who it is. Rowan leant back against a small ledge, his legs aching. I'd be happy to. Carlos reached out his hand and shook on it. I just need one thing in return, Rowan said, his voice deep and serious. What's that? Carlos asked. I need you to help me find my girl. Chapter 26. Sonia. Sonia and Oswald watched as the 2 remaining snipers shot every one of the infected outside the gates. It was such a waste of good experiment material it almost made Sonia's heart hurt. So much wasted potential. But one thing's for sure. The government wouldn't want to see piles of them up against the gates, a reminder of Lifelong's failure in creating and containing the infection. Things needed to look under control, despite the obvious shitstorm. Sonia's radio crackled with static. Sonia? It's Lola. The health secretary is here. Lola? Where was she? And why hadn't she said anything to Oswald about seeing Sonia in the hall? She seemed like the type to love a good snitch. Oswald and Sonia moved fast, through the ground floor and into the elevators, right up to the rooftop. They paced down the long walkway to the outside, the wind roaring as they surfaced. A black helicopter descended on the helipad, hovering for a moment before touching down. As soon as the door was open, Sonia locked eyes with Janice Thomas, health secretary and she-devil, wearing a purple jacket and trousers. What was this, fucking Buckingham Palace? She strolled towards the building, her saggy bulldog face jiggling in the wind. Right, let's get this sorted, shall we? She said in passing, completely disregarding Sonia and Oswald. They turned to each other in silent disbelief and walked behind her, ready for a dressing down. As they made their way up the walkway, Sonia had a fantasy of tying Janice down in the restraints in the lab and just leaving her there to rot. Get her out of their way once and for all. Then she remembered Olive in the morgue on that cold slab, her skin rough and charred. No. She pushed it out of her mind. You know, it's my wedding anniversary today, Janice groaned, not turning to talk. 3 nights in Cyprus. I was really looking forward to it. Sonia bit her tongue. It wasn't worth the fight. Where's Lola? Janice asked. Why would she want her? She's around. Somewhere. I'll send her a message. No need, Janice said, grabbing her own phone. Why don't we have signal here? Is the emergency satellite not working? I'll talk to tech and get you set up on it. Why are we not already on it? This should have been sorted, Janice snapped. Sonia took a deep breath. She could feel the anger burning in her chest. Sorry, that's all set up now, Lola said, appearing from around the corner. She stared at Sonia for a moment before joining Janice. Everybody stop, Janice said, immediately halting Sonia, Oswald, and a couple of London suits. I've given Lola the lead from here on out. What? She'll be our shared point of contact. I want a full review drawn up of the outbreak so far. We are seizing any active experiments, Noxidone or otherwise. What are you talking about? Sonia barked. I am here to get a grip on this situation. You will assist and listen to the people I have chosen to lead. Why Lola? Oswald asked. She's a new hire. Janice cackled, staring at Sonia, then Oswald. Lola works for me, she said, almost in disbelief that they hadn't worked it out. We knew you were losing your way months ago. You've been spying on us, Oswald growled. We've been watching, yes. Sonia wanted to punch her right in the nose. I have had eyes across everything going on here, Janice continued, enjoying the sound of her own voice and TV drama villain reveal. The theatrics of it all was sickening. You've broken our contract, our rules of engagement, Oswald said, his face flushed red. The board will have your heads. I'm sorry? Janice smiled, her eyes dark and shark-like, locked on Oswald. Do you need a reminder of how this all works? She turned to the suits, feigning laughter. We are not worried about your board. We are concerned with this nightmare you've unleashed on British soil. That's what I'm here to fix. Sonia looked over, completely bewildered by the whole situation. This had all been them. Sonia was ready to barge out of the building and lock herself in her apartment. She had enough food for a few days, plenty of rest to catch up on, and a really good fucking gun. Whether she turned it on Janice or herself was still to be determined. She could get a bit somber after drinking. Then a thought occurred. Just a flash of something, almost illusory. If Janice and the rest of them had been across everything going on, as she put it, did they know something about Olive's murder? Had Carl done it on Lola's orders? Is that why she didn't tell Oswald? The pieces were falling together in real time. Sonia looked into Janice's eyes. Come to the lab. I'll show you what we've been working on. Chapter 27. Todd. The perimeter alarm started blaring, high-pitched squeaks warbling above. Come on, Maggie said, running to the house. Claire? Todd caught up, poking his head into the living room, a loud vibration rumbling through the floor. That didn't sound good. She's not here, Maggie said, storming to her basement. Todd tried his best to step over all of the body parts on the floor, but something squashed under his foot and it made him audibly gag. He daren't look down in fear of puking again. He didn't have enough in his stomach to keep spewing it out everywhere. Claire? Todd called, joining in the search. Have you checked her room? Maggie shook her head, flustered. No, she groaned, heading for the stairs. Then Todd caught her in the corner of his vision. Maggie, outside! Through the front window, he saw Claire riding the bike Maggie had left out front. She faltered slightly, before getting the rhythm of it, heading out towards the long road. Fucking hell, Maggie said, peering out the window momentarily before bolting towards the front door. As she pulled open the front door, the loud vibration came back, introducing a small convoy of armed vehicles. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker on the back. Stay in your homes. Do not approach. Maggie? Todd asked, completely dumbfounded. Maggie ripped open the door and sprinted towards the mangled fence at the front of the property. Madam, get in your house. Maggie! Todd screamed from the door, frozen. Stuck between the house and the patio, his heart was racing. His mind was blurry. Come on, Todd, go and help. Todd shifted his weight to his front leg, ready to run. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. She was out there, completely surrounded, chasing after her daughter. Be a fucking man and run, Todd! Fuck, he said, bouncing a few times on his feet. Then he went. Maggie, come back! Get in! The loudspeaker boomed. Bullets sprayed from automatic weapons. Todd collapsed, crunching on the shingle. He rolled onto his back, pushing himself towards the house again. Maggie was on her hands and knees, trying to squash between the metal gate. Ricochets sparked from the structure, causing Maggie to backtrack too. My daughter is out there, she screamed, barely audible over the gunfire. No one was listening. Growling, she went to stand up, but Todd tugged her back down by her shoulder. Out the back! He screamed in her face, oblivious to whether she heard him. But she did, nodding. They both scuffled through the shingle, tiny sharp rocks piercing their skin. At the front door, they hauled themselves through the opening. Maggie got up, moving as fast as she could. She was limping, but trying to hide it. Go find her. I'll be right behind you, Todd shouted. But wait. He grabbed the shotgun and some shells from the table and shoved them into her hands. Maggie smiled, nodding. Then she turned and ran, disappearing out the trap door at the back. Let's go. Todd grabbed a tote bag from the kitchen, which was half full of potatoes. He tossed them all onto the floor and accidentally looked directly into Ross's mangled face. His jaw torn from his head, slopped by him like a devoured chicken leg. Bracing himself, he chucked a couple of bottles of water into the bag. Then he searched for a weapon, grabbing a handgun from one of the dead boys. The magazine clutched in his dead hand looked like it probably fit, so he threw that in there too. He wanted his drone and the picture of his gran, but the soldiers were out there still. In his head, he knew he wasn't going to leave them, so he took a deep breath and carefully snuck around the doorframe. He saw Maggie sprinting towards the trees, ready to take the road. The soldiers fired towards the forest, and he hoped more than anything that she made it without harm. She was also way fucking ahead of him, so he needed to get a move on. Making the most of the distraction, he rushed to the cabin. The door hadn't closed or locked, which was one thing to thank the universe for. As fast as he could, he grabbed the bags, threw them over his arm, and maneuvered back to the house. With a final glance at the house, double-checking if there were any essentials to take, he paced towards the back door, his gut stirring. Around the front of the house, the soldiers were lined up, expecting him. He couldn't follow Maggie. His throat was closing up, breath rapid. He couldn't be alone again. "Get back in the house!" Shit. The soldiers prepared to fire. Todd did his best to raise his hands in surrender, but the bags were heavy. His two options branched out in front of him, almost cinematic in his mind. Go back inside, or do everything he could to help Maggie find Claire. Silently, he backtracked around the wall, prepared to follow their orders. Then he used every ounce of energy in his body to dart in the opposite direction, heading past the side of the house and into a huge field, a moving target weighed down by a ton of luggage. Any moment now they'd fire and put a hole in his chest. Todd wondered if it would hurt. He wondered if his Nan would be there to help usher him to the afterlife. He could already see her smile again. The end.